Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a Scotland you won't find in travel brochures or whiskey ads. The secret life of a Jacobite sympathizer in 1714. Scotland, the mist-shrouded glens and hidden bothies, where loyalty to a fallen dynasty could cost you your life. If you think you can handle a day beneath the weight of peat-smoke skies and the constant dread of redcoat patrols, think again. By the end of this tale, you'll understand exactly why you wouldn't survive one single sunrise as a Jacobite sympathizer. We'll slip past dew-soaked heather, trace the trembling hand carrying a crimson-sealed dispatch to Stirling, and feel the chill of granite underfoot as whispered plots unfold in candlelit cellars. So, if you're curious or bold enough to imagine your own name inked in that secret letter, hit like and subscribe, but only if you're ready for a slow, immersive history that soothes even as it unsettles. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what the moon looks like in your sky. I love sharing these quiet moments across centuries and time zones. Now, settle in. Let the quiet hum of your fan become part of the tale. Take a deep breath and imagine the scent of damp peat and distant pine, the muffled echo of a lone bagpipe calling clans to council, and the hush of mist drifting over empty moors. This isn't a story of grand Highland victories, it's the raw reality of simmering rebellion, where honor and fear danced a knife-edge waltz and every gesture, every word could seal your fate. Dim your lights, exhale your day's worries, and join me as we uncover why one day in 1714, Scotland as a Jacobite sympathizer would be your last. Imagine yourself crouched beside a modest hearth in a weathered bothy, the low roof traced by rough-hewn beams darkened with age and soot. The peat fire before you smoulders with a gentle amber glow, each ember pulsing softly like a slow, steady heartbeat. You feel the warmth radiate through your thin woolen cloak, damp from last night's mist, settling into your shoulders and easing the chill that clings to stone floors cooled by pre-dawn air. Above, a small stack of fresh turf waits in patient readiness, neatly heaped, each slice of sod heavy with the scent of wet earth and the promise of bright flames. This is where we find Ewan MacLean, tacksman of a humble holding on the edge of a silent glen. He leans forward, fingertips grazing the fire's edge, watching sparks drift upward until they vanish into shadows overhead. The hush around him is profound, as if the bothy itself holds its breath. A distant drip of condensation from the eaves is the only sound, each drop echoing in the quiet, a measured metronome counting out the moments before dawn. Then, a soft thump. The door's crude latch lifts, hinges creaking in reply, and a messenger's cloak brushes against the earthen floor. That single sound cracks open the morning's stillness like the tap of a judge's gavel, and Ewan's pulse stirs. He shifts his weight, the wool of his cloak whispering against itself, and a faint tang of brimstone mingles with the peat smoke, carrying a tension that ripples through the small room. The messenger stands framed in the doorway, a silhouette etched against paling sky, water beading on his shoulders. He offers no greeting, only a breathless nod, and a single word caught in ragged Gaelic, George. As Ewan's mind turns the syllable over, the hearth's embers flare, and you can almost feel his heartbeat aligning with the flicker of flame. The word carries weight, 7 heavy letters that shift centuries-old loyalties like boulders on a hillside. Leaning back, Ewan allows his eyes to adjust to the messenger's damp features. He notes the bristle of rain on the man's beard, the way his boots press into soft mud outside. Listeners might sense the subtle tremor in that visitor's voice, or the way the bothy's single window refracts a thin band of rose-tinted dawn light that spills across the hearth's warmth. Even in this simple chamber, a room defined by smoke-stained walls, a single plank table, and the heaped turf history arrives, like an uninvited guest. Ewan reaches for a fresh slice of turf, pressing it onto the embers. The added fuel hisses, exhaling a plume of fragrant smoke that curls toward the rafters. That gentle hiss is a counterpoint to the messenger's news. It's a reminder that life in the Highlands is built on small, deliberate actions, careful tending of fires, measured steps through boggy ground, and occasionally, decisions as momentous as choosing a king. He rises, boots whispering on the stone floor, and crosses to the door. Beyond lies a world still half asleep, heather swaying in a light breeze, distant crags etched against a slate sky, and the faint cry of a cuckoo. As Ewan listens, the hush of the bothy lingers behind him, a cocoon of hearth-born warmth and uncertainty. In that pregnant pause between the dying glow of embers and the first flush of morning light. You feel the weight of an ancient choice settling on Ewan's shoulders. The peat-smoke hung glen holds its silence, and the truth becomes as tangible as the rough-hewn beams above. Allegiance can warm you like fire, but it can also burn. And with that, listeners are anchored firmly in the rhythm of Highland life, slow, deliberate, and forever poised between comfort and crisis. Imagine yourself standing just inside the low doorway of a humble bothie, where the last tendrils of peat smoke swirl beneath rough-hewn rafters. The air here is a tapestry of scents, the lingering sweetness of boiling oats, the earthy coolness of damp stone floors, and beneath it all, the subtle perfume of wild heather carried home on a woolen shawl. There, framed by the threshold's soft glow, is Ewan's mother, her lined face warmed by the hearth's ember light. Each wrinkle tells a story of hard winters endured, of children raised beneath storm-swept skies, and of loyalties woven into every thread of clan history. Her shawl, spun from heavy sheep's wool, drapes around her shoulders in gentle folds, its rough texture softened by years of faithful use. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the faint sigh of ancient sheep grazing on distant braes, their memory embedded in each fibre. She settles on a low stool, the wooden seat creaking beneath her as she lifts her hands, delicate despite years of labour, to smooth back stray wisps of greying hair. The firelight dances across her weathered cheeks, revealing a softness in her eyes that contrasts with the resolute set of her mouth. Ewan, crouched by the hearth, looks up, and his gaze follows a familiar ritual, the gentle unfolding of a faded kerchief. That kerchief, once crisp and white, now bears the muted hues of age. Embroidered long ago with the intertwined thistles and heather of Clan MacLean, its colours have softened to dusky purples and greens. Ewan's fingers trace the fraying edges as his mother begins to speak, softly, deliberately, in the lilting cadence of Gaelic. "Rig sumas," she murmurs, her voice as steady as a slow-moving stream. The words roll off her tongue like pebbles cast into water, each syllable rippling out to touch unseen shores. "Old pretender," she repeats, eyes distant as if she can see the exiled court in Saint-Germain, hear the echo of bagpipes across the channel. These phrases carry weight, suspended in the bothie's warm hush. Listeners might notice how her breath puffs in rhythmic clouds, each release swaying with the flame's flicker. The Gaelic she speaks feels like history itself, tales told by candlelight for generations, each story a thread in the tapestry of loyalty. As she recalls forebears who marched beneath the Stuart standard, great-grandfathers lost on Culloden's fields, grandmothers who whispered prayers in hidden glens, you sense the quiet pride woven through her words. There is no bitterness here, only a serene acceptance that some debts outlive their lenders. She speaks of banners once bright, now faded, of promises carved into stone, now softened by moss. Ewan listens, eyes unfocused, taking in every inflection, the rise and fall of her voice, the slight catch when she names a lost uncle, the gentle humour when she recalls a stubborn father who swore he'd never bow to any king but the one in his heart. You might catch a faint smile tug at her lips as she describes young Ewan running barefoot through heather, chasing after rabbits with more enthusiasm than caution. A reminder that even in the weightiest of loyalties, life's lighter moments endure. Behind them, the peat embers glow low, hissing softly as if in response to her stories. The bothie's single window frames a sky, just brushing the horizon with dawn's first blush. And beyond it, the glen waits, silent witness to a family bound by ancient vows. In this intimate exchange, listeners are not observers, but confidants, drawn into a moment where personal memory and political destiny entwine. The warmth of hearth and shore contrasts with the chill that news of a new king brings, a reminder that home is both sanctuary and battleground. And as her final Gaelic phrase fades into the hush, you feel the weight of centuries settle gently over the room, carrying you deeper into the quiet rhythms of Highland life and the secrets told in a mother's soft, undying tongue. Imagine yourself standing in the soft dawn light beneath the gnarled canopy of an ancient rowan, dew purling on its branches like scattered stars. All around you, 6 other tacksmen crouch over bundles of fresh heather, their plaid cloaks pooling against damp turf. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint tang of peat smoke from distant bothies, and the hushed rustle of the glen awakening. In your hands, you cradle a handful of thorny heather, slender stalks tipped with tiny purple blossoms, each bloom still shimmering with raindrops. You press the emerald leaves between your fingers, feeling their supple resistance give way with a soft, satisfying snap. The scent rises at once, a brisk, bitter perfume that mingles floral sweetness with sharp green tang, a reminder that beauty in these hills often comes with a sting. Listeners might note how the stems crackle under gentle pressure, a calm percussion that echoes off granite outcrops, drawing the gathered men into a shared rhythm. Beside you, Ewan MacLean lifts his own sprig, damp wool sleeves brushing the moss underfoot. With deliberate care he crushes the buds, releasing a plume of herbaceous steam that drifts upward like whispered promise. You almost taste the cool moisture clinging to the leaves, an essence of dawn itself, distilled into fragile petals. Now imagine the scent mingling with metallic cold. Each man unstraps his sword from a worn leather baldric, the buckles buck-thump startling in the hush. The blade's pommel glints with a silver sheen under the pale sun, and when you close your fingers around it you feel the hard ridges of the grip, smooth from years of use yet still cool enough to steal warmth from your palm. There is a barely perceptible pulse in the steel, as though the sword itself hums with the centuries of oaths it has witnessed. At a soft signal, perhaps the low nod of a soundchide, the tacksmen lift their heather to their hilts. Water drips from each leaf, tiny beads that catch the light before they fall in shallow arcs onto cold metal. The droplets hiss as they meet the tempered steel, sending up a faint hiss of heat and moisture mingling. Listeners might picture those droplets like morning dew evaporating on a polished shield, each hiss a subtle affirmation. Once you touch this blade, you touch a commitment that cannot be undone. Beneath your fingers, the sword's cold bite contrasts vividly with the warmth of your own breath, visible in brief silver puffs. You press a final handful of crushed heather to the crossguard, the sharp bitterness clinging to leather grips and sinking into the fine grain of your palm. A collective inhale rises as the scent lifts and drifts into the glen, carrying the vow to unseen ears. Now comes a moment of shared intimacy, rarely spoken but deeply felt. In low voices, so quiet that you might wonder if you heard it at all, the men murmur slante, their Gaelic toast to health, and in this moment to courage. It is both a greeting and a benediction. May this oath bind you as tightly as leather wraps your sword. May it hold fast through trial and blood. Listeners are drawn into the echo of that single word, multiplied by 6 voices, resonating in the hush. In that hush, you become hyper-aware of every texture, the rough pull of your own plaid against thigh, the sharp crunch of spent heather scraps underfoot, the distant drip of condensation from rowan leaves, the metallic reverberation in your bones as sword meets turf. Each sensory detail weaves into a tapestry of resolve. Here, in the soft glow of dawn, ordinary men transform into living pledges. And as you stand there, sashaying between warmth and chill, between fragrant bloom and cold steel, you understand the subtle power of this ritual. No grand speeches carry them forward, only the simple act of pressing nature's gift onto cold weapon, of sharing breath in Gaelic solidarity. In that quiet exchange, listeners feel the weight of loyalty settle upon each shoulder, a burden both solemn and strangely comforting. You are not alone in this pledge, and together these vows will shape the course of a kingdom. You step onto a vast expanse of dew-damp turf that stretches toward a lone rowan tree, its twisted limbs etched against a pale dawn sky. Each blade of grass shimmers under tiny beads of moisture, soft as pearls, and your boots sink into the spongy ground with a gentle squish that muffles your approach. There is no grand pathway here, just the familiar resistance of the earth, as though it wishes to hold you back or test your resolve before you draw near. In the distance you make out the dark shapes of 6 other figures converging in a semicircle around the rowan. They are the tacksmen, men of modest means, yet proud of their small holdings and bound by a shared purpose. Each wears a tartan draped over one shoulder, the patterns faded and patched from years of weathering wind and rain. You notice the irregularity of the weaves. One cloth bears a curious stitch where a grandmother mended a tear. Another shows the sheen of repeated oiling to repel moisture. These are not the smooth plaids of grand ceremony, but the homespun shields of survival. As you draw closer, the faint exhale of breath becomes visible in the chill air, tiny clouds that drift upward and dissolve into the sky. Listen for the low drone of a bagpipe playing somewhere beyond the knoll. It is a single sustained note, deep and mournful, echoing off distant crags, sending gooseflesh rippling along your forearms. The sound seems both a call to arms and a lullaby, urging you forward while reminding you of the quiet beauty you're risking everything to defend. Each tacksman holds a walking staff carved from native ash or hazel. The wood's grain is smoothed by years of use, polished by hands that once rested upon it for comfort more often than for support. Their hands wrap around the staffs with fingers bare to the chill, knuckles white against the dark wood. You sense a silent camaraderie in the way they shift weight from one foot to the other. Small, unspoken gestures that say, "We are here, we stand together." The rowan itself stands sentinel, its bark knobbly and scarred, a living monument that has watched sunrises countless times before. Beneath its branches, you sense 100 years of whispered promises and hidden meetings. Birds nesting in its upper limbs, their chirps long silenced by the gravity of the moment. Even the tree seems to lean in, its leaves trembling in the soft breeze, as though eager to witness the ceremony. You might notice the subtle humor in the scene. One tacksman straightens his suddenly crooked bonnet, only to have a rogue tuft of grass cling to its rim. Another coughs discreetly, sending a stray pipe of smoke from his clay tobacco stem curling into the dawn. These small human moments remind you that these men are not caricatures of revolt, but real people, sturdy, weather-beaten, and perhaps as weary of moss on their boots as they are resolute in their cause. The damp earth beneath your feet seems to pulse with anticipation, a living reminder that the land itself is at stake. Each breath you draw carries the scent of moist peat, wild thyme, and the faint tang of oxen in distant fields. Even the air tastes of something unnameable, the promise of change, the risk of blood, the quiet hope that these measured steps will lead to a future unburdened by foreign crowns. As the last note of the bagpipe fades, the tacksmen form a loose circle, heads bowed just enough that their chin's stubble catches the first light. The rasp of tartan edges brushing together is the only accompaniment as they prepare to speak the ancient words of loyalty. In that hush, you become acutely aware of every detail, the rough wool against skin, the soft give of turf under soles, the frost creeping at the edge of each fold in their cloaks. Here, under that solitary rowan, the gathering of the tacksmen is more than a meeting, it is a contract with history, and though the scene is still, unmoving as a painting come to life, you can almost feel the weight of fate shifting, the roots of rebellion taking hold in the very soil you stand upon. In this tranquil yet charged moment, listeners sense that the future is about to unfold, one deliberate word and one crushed heather bloom at a time. A hush settles over the circle as the grey-bearded Seanchide steps forward. His wooden staff, gnarled ash, or perhaps yew, rests in his left hand, its shaft carved with intricate knotwork that spirals like the roots of ancient oaks. Each carved twist and turn catches the pale dawn light, revealing faint traces of ochre pigment still clinging in carved recesses. The staff's smoothness under the Seanchide's gnarled fingers speaks of years of faithful use, every contour worn by countless grips as he journeyed from bothy to battlefield and back again, carrying stories that outlast war and weather. He straightens slightly, the weight of centuries in his posture, and lifts his head. A single strand of silver hair escapes from beneath his hood, quivering like a tremor of age and wisdom. The air, already cool against your skin, seems to shudder in anticipation. In that space before words, you hear the soft rustle of woolen cloaks brushing against one another, and the faint scrape of swords shifting in their sheaths, an unconscious gesture of respect for the tale about to be told. Then, his voice rises. It starts quietly, a low murmur that vibrates through the chilled air like a distant drumbeat. Listeners might feel it more than hear it at first, a deep resonance that stirs shadows in the hollows of the rowan's gnarled bark. He begins in Gaelic, his words stepping out in measured cadence. O'Shows a dadja, nan Criok. Far in golden raised banner flew. His breath puffs in rhythmic clouds, each exhale a plume of meaning that drifts upward and dissipates against the pale sky. As the verses unfold, he invokes Robert the Bruce, the lion-hearted king, whose outnumbered men found victory at Bannockburn. Describe how the Seanchide's tone shifts, pride rolling in his vowels like pebbles in a stream, when he speaks of Bruce's roar upon Rathlin Isle and the hammer of stockfish. Listeners sense the excitement of battle softened by distance and time, the clash of arms replaced by the resonance of memory. Then, seamlessly, he turns to Mary, Queen of Scots. her image conjured in gentle contrast to the warrior king. His voice softens, each word a reverent brushstroke, and fair Mary, her radiance unwavering. In captive halls of lonely stone, here the Cianchide's cadence slows further. His voice hovers like a moth over a dying flame. You might notice how the scent of damp earth mingles with the faint perfume of heather crushed underfoot, as though the glen itself leans in to hear. In that moment, listeners feel the hushed, deep and cold air drifts through cloaks, swords hang heavier in scabbards, and even the breath of the rowan leaves seems to pause. There is subtle humour in his performance, an almost imperceptible lift at the corner of his mouth when he recalls Mary's famously sharp tongue, or a barely audible chuckle when he quotes a retort to an English diplomat. These small flourishes remind you that this storyteller, despite his gravitas, is as human as any tacksman. Fond of a well-timed joke, respectful of solemn vows, and aware that hope often springs from laughter as much as loyalty. As the Cianchide's invocation draws to a close, he lets the final phrase linger on the air, an echo that ripples through the gathering like dropped pebbles in still water. The assembled tacksmen bow their heads in unison, swords remaining sheathed but hearts unlocked. In that quiet interval, listeners sense something profound, the intangible spark of fervour passing from old bard to youthful blood, making each man present not just a witness, but a living vessel for the cause. The Soundchide lowers his staff, the knotwork gleaming softly, and the silence lingers a moment longer. Then, with a single, slow nod, he steps back, returning the circle to the tacksman. The rowan tree creaks as if acknowledging its role in this ancient rite, and you, as its silent audience, carry away the memory of that voice. A voice steeped in time, as calming as smoke drifting through cold castle halls, yet potent enough to fuel rebellion in every beating heart. You stand in the soft glow of dawn beneath the gnarled branches of that ancient rowan, the sky beyond just brushing from indigo to pale slate. The air is thick with peat tang, and the hush of a glen holding its breath. At your feet, the turf feels springy and damp, each step releasing muted crunches of moss and earth. In your hands, you cradle a small bundle of freshly cut heather, slender stalks tipped with delicate purple blossoms, each bloom glistening with the night's dew. You bring a sprig of heather to your nose, inhaling deeply. The scent is paradoxical, a gentle sweetness reminiscent of distant summer, laced with a sharp green bite that awakens your senses. Listeners might notice the faint echo of distant flutes carried on the breeze, or the slight tremor in their own breath as they lean in closer, sharing this intimate moment of transformation. Beside you, Ewan MacLean bends lower, pressing his fingers into a handful of the same heather. You hear the soft snap as he crushes the brittle stems, releasing a puff of herbaceous steam that drifts upward like whispered secrets. Each rupture of stem is a small declaration, as though the heather itself is confessing loyalties, long kept silent. The gentle crackle blends with the distant drip of condensation from rowan leaves, composing a slow, deliberate rhythm. Now, shift your attention from blossom to blade. The tacksmen draw their swords from time-darkened scabbards, simple Highland broadswords with leather-wrapped hilts and steel blades dulled to a satin sheen by countless hands. You feel the weight of your own sword hilt settle into your palm, smooth yet cool, the ridges of the grip pressing into your skin like fingers of solid resolve. Listeners might sense the tang of metal so keen that it almost tastes like rain on copper. With deliberate care, you lift the crushed heather to the sword's crossguard. Tiny droplets of water, clinging to each leaf, gather and then fall in slow arcs onto the cold steel. There's a soft hiss as each drop meets metal, a sound like distant embers turning to steam. In that hiss, you hear the boundary between nature's quiet and the man-made claws that will follow, the point of no return. As you press heather against the hilt, the texture shifts from smooth leather to rough blossom. The petals yield under your palm, soft as velvet, but beneath lies the grit of thorns scraped away in haste. The duality is striking. The same blossom that offers a gentle fragrance also insists on its sharpness, a living metaphor for the loyalty you're about to pledge. Your fingertips tingle with the stickiness of plant oils, and the blade's coolness seeps into your bones, anchoring you to the moment. Then comes the shared pulse of affirmation. Each man around you raises his sword in a slow, solemn arc, blades parallel, hilts aligned. In unison, voices murmur a single word, almost too soft to catch. Slind, a Gaelic toast to health, lingers on the cool morning air, transformed here into a vow that echoes off distant crags. Listeners feel the hush chase the final syllable, as though the glen itself absorbs the promise. Between each speaker's breath, you might detect the faintest hint of humor in the scene. An older tacksman, with a missing tooth, mispronounces the final E, eliciting a stifled chuckle that ripples through the circle. Yet even that laughter is tempered by gravity. No one dares break the solemnity for long. The shared smile becomes another thread in the tapestry of solidarity. As the ritual concludes, you lower your blade, feeling the final tremor of collective will. The crushed heather lies in a small pile at the rowan's base, its color dimmed by sweat and steel. The scent remains potent, an invisible banner fluttering in the breeze. Each of you steps back, boots making gentle imprints in the soft grass. The moment's ceremony complete, yet echoing in muscle memory. In that lingering stillness, listeners become acutely aware of every texture, the soft give of turf beneath soles, the grain of leather against skin, the distant lap of water in a hidden stream. They carry away not just the image of swords and blooms, but the weight of ancient loyalties sealed in heather water and steel. And as the glen returns to its pre-dawn calm, the memory of that ritual pulses gently, like embers awaiting another breath of wind. You step from the soft hollow of the rowan clearing onto a vast expanse of peat bog, the ground beneath you quivering like a sigh. Each footfall descends into a spongy cradle of damp turf, and you can almost feel the bog's slow pulse, as though the marsh itself inhales and exhales with measured deliberation. Listeners might sense that soft squelch with each step, a gentle counterpoint to the whisper of mist drifting across the moor. Your boots, worn leather scuffed by countless miles, sink until the soles press against a denser underlayer. You lift your foot and feel the peat's reluctant grip release. A damp kiss that clings for an instant before letting go. Tiny black flecks of organic matter cling to the soles, and when you brush them away, they crumble between your fingers like ancient relics, reminders of centuries of plant life preserved in waterlogged stillness. As you continue, the bog gives way to scattered granite outcrops. These are the Highland's old bones, shoulders of stone heaved skyward in a gesture that predates any human claim. Their surfaces are worn smooth by wind and rain, and in places, pale lichen forms patterns that resemble weathered maps, topographies within topographies, inviting quiet contemplation. You pause to trace a finger along a polished groove, feeling the stone's cool firmness beneath your touch, a stark contrast to the peat's yielding softness. In the half-light, swirling mist clings to the land like gauze, softening every edge. Shadows deepen between boulders, and the peat's dark surface absorbs light, reflecting only the faintest glimmer of sky. Listeners might notice how the air tastes of damp minerals and distant rain, a scent so subtle that it feels less like an aroma and more like the memory of a storm. The silence is profound, broken only by the distant drip of water from granite ledges and the plaintive call of a lone curlew echoing across the empty moor. With every careful stride, you become acutely aware of this uneasy alliance between man and land. The bog can bear your weight if you walk with patience and respect, but one misstep, one careless rush, and you risk plunging thigh-deep into mire that will hold you fast. The peat is both cradle and trap, offering a soft path, even as it threatens to swallow the unwary whole. Granite, by contrast, stands immovable and indifferent, stone sentinels that observe without judgment. Ewan advances with quiet deliberation, long woolen sleeves brushing against damp heather. He tests each step before committing his weight, a dance of caution perfected by countless journeys. Listeners might picture the small heather blooms bending under his footfalls, petals scattering like confetti at a silent festival, his breath plumes in pale clouds, and you could almost hear the faint rasp of woolen plaid rubbing against rough granite as he steadies himself. There is a subtle humor in the scene, an awareness that despite the high stakes of oaths and conspiracies, nature remains impartial and unhurried. A sudden rustle in the peat startles him. He glances down to find a small frog hopping away, its mottled back blending seamlessly with the bog's surface. The frog's unbothered departure is a gentle reminder. Life endures in even the most treacherous terrain, and the world will continue turning long after human conflicts have faded. As dawn brightens, shafts of pale light pierce the mist, illuminating ridges of peat that glint with moisture. The granite outcrops catch the glow, revealing veins of quartz that sparkle like distant stars drawn down to earth. In these moments of subtle grandeur, listeners feel a kinship with Ewan's solitary passage, an understanding that the land carries stories as deeply etched as the lines on a storyteller's map. Finally, The path ahead rises toward a firmer ridge, where the bogs sway, eases and solid ground returns. You step onto drier heath adorned with tiny blooms of bog myrtle, their fragrance a gentle balm after the peat's rich musk. Behind you, the quaking turf settles back into silence, and the granite shoulders stand unmoved. In that quiet, you sense the land exhaling, a breath of acknowledgement for this fleeting journey. Through the soft cadence of each step, the interplay of yielding peat and steadfast granite echoes the listener's own heartbeat. Steady, unhurried, and mindful. Here, on the edge of wilderness, the land is both cradle and witness, holding your passage in memory long after you have moved on. Imagine the pale dawn mist still clinging to the heather, each blossom bowed under droplets of dew, when your gaze is drawn to a distant curl of smoke rising straight and true from the moor's edge. It hangs in the half-light like a silent question, an invitation or a warning. The smoke is the palest blue-grey, a slim column twisting skyward before dispersing into the soft, muted hues of morning. You step closer, boots brushing damp grass, each footfall soft as a muted drum. The scent carried on the light breeze is subtle at first, a faint tang of peat from last night's fire, sweet with smoky richness, but beneath it is something more domestic. A gentle bitterness of oatmeal, left too long over embers, grains crisping around the edges, until they crackle with a resigned sigh. That scent drifts across the emptiness, playful as a stray kitten, yet tinged with a hint of abandonment. One wonders whether the pot still bubbles within or has long since gone cold. As you near a low, split-rail fence, its weathered posts crested with lichen and crowned by tufts of grass, you pause. The fence sags in places, as though leaning toward the landscape in consolation, and you notice how a stray tendril of smoke slips beneath the rails, slithering toward you like a curious guest. Your fingers tighten on your cloak, the wool shifting against your palm with a faint rustle. The breeze picks up, tugging at the fabric, and you feel the tug echo in your chest. Should you cross this threshold into unknown hospitality, or withdraw to the safety of solitude? A sudden creak, that intimate, human sound, drifts from within the bothy. Floorboards flex under an unseen weight. Someone stirring inside, or perhaps a lone sheep, seeking refuge. The creak is both a greeting and a challenge, a soft percussion that resonates through the morning quiet. Listeners might sense their own pulse quicken, mirroring Ewan's careful deliberation as he studies the hut's rough-hewn walls. The bothy itself is modest, a single room of stone, roofed with heavy slate that seems to press down in silent solidarity. Moss threads through its seams, and small ferns cling to cracks where rainwater collects. A tiny window, paned by crude glass, glints faintly, catching the smoke's reflection like a distant eye. The door stands slightly ajar, warped by years of weather. Its latch is a simple wooden peg, worn smooth by hands both friendly and wary. You step forward, the scent of burnt oatmeal growing stronger, mingling now with the faint, savoury aroma of cooking broth. Perhaps a last scrap of meat or wild herbs simmering in what remains of the morning's fuel. The peat tang deepens, heavier now, reminding you that warmth here is a luxury earned by chopping and hauling, not merely struck by a flint. Ewan's silhouette appears in the doorway. Cloak, thrown back, sword hilt just visible at his side. His eyes narrow, taking in the scene with strategic precision. You might notice the slight tilt of his head, the way his nostrils flare as he inhales both promise and peril. There is subtle humour in his hesitation. A stray chicken pecks at the fence line, blissfully ignorant of the high stakes, and Ewan's fist tightens as though he might skewer it for breakfast. Or perhaps to remind himself that life outside the bothy remains as vivid as his mission. The wind shifts again, carrying a fresh wisp of smoke that drapes over the fence like a silk scarf. It beckons with a gentle curl, and for a moment you see possibility, shelter, news of fellow Jacobites, a chance to replenish and relay crucial word. But beneath that hope lies the sharper edge of doubt. Every meeting in these wilds could be a trap laid by redcoat scouts, every pot left to simmer an act of naive trust. In that silent standoff, man, land, and bothy paused in cautious equilibrium. Listeners feel the weight of Ewan's choice. He steps forward, boots cracking broken turf, and the bothy's door creaks wider, as though inviting him in. The smoke curls around him, a smoky embrace, or a warning finger. And as he crosses the threshold, you carry with you the hush and the scent, the thin spiral of smoke weaving its own story in the moor's endless tapestry. Imagine standing at the edge of a glen so still that each breath seems amplified. The peat underfoot retains the faint warmth of the day's sun, though dawn's chill still lingers on your cheeks. Above, grey clouds drift lazily across a pale sky, and the only sound is the soft whisper of wind through heather. Then, like a breath released after a held silence, a cuckoo's plaintive cry peals across the valley, its hollow two-note call cutting gently through the hush. The note unfolds leisurely, each syllable pronounced with deliberate clarity. Cuckoo. It floats upward, meeting damp rock faces before cascading back in ripples. Imagine the cry travelling from granite ledge to mossy crag, bending around wind-sculpted cliffs, and disappearing into the milky mist. Listeners might feel their own chest expand as the sound washes over them, a reminder that even in solitude, voices carry farther than miles. Ewan MacLean pauses mid-step, boots planted on damp turf as the call drifts toward him. He lifts a hand subconsciously, shading his eyes as though the sound were a distant flare. For a heartbeat, the glen seems to hold its breath in response, and you sense a curious tension. The land, so often witness to plots and oaths, now offers something gentler, a simple melody birthed from the rhythm of spring. As the echo returns, it shimmers against the hillside, softening into a ghostly repetition that fades like a sigh. You might notice how the second iteration sounds slightly warped, a playful mimicry of the original cuckoo. It is as if the glen itself joins in, each crag contributing its own accent to the song, turning a solitary bird's call into a chorus of stone. Listeners drifting on that haunting note feel the contrast between nature's effortless melody and the calculated schemes unfolding in candlelit cellars. The cuckoo's call carries no agenda, no oaths to James Stewart, no secret dispatches hidden beneath saddle packs. Yet in its simplicity lies potency, a reminder that the smallest voice, sustained and true, can spark reverberations far beyond its source. Ewan exhales slowly, the sound of his breath mingling with the final echoes. You might almost taste the clean, metallic hint of morning mist on his lips, or feel the way his plaid shifts as he straightens. A small, wry smile tugs at his lips, perhaps at the absurdity of pausing Jacobite plans for a bird's song, or at the realization that nature does its own plotting in whispers. The glen returns to near silence, but now that first note lingers in memory, an oral bookmark in the landscape. Listeners sense their heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of that call, steady, unhurried, and oddly comforting. The cuckoo seems to have pressed a pause button on the day, reminding both Ewan and us that amid oaths and danger, moments of pure, unadorned beauty persist. As you follow Ewan onward, the memory of the cuckoo's echo becomes a companion on the journey. Each time you sense distant calls, perhaps of sheep bleating across a hilltop or water trickling from a hidden spring, you recall how a single bird's cry once wove through granite and heather, bending the land's own voice into a gentle chorus. And so, listeners settle deeper into the glen's embrace, hearts aligned with nature's understated lullaby. The cuckoo's call, both question and comfort, drifts onward into mist, an invitation to remember that even in times of turmoil, the quietest notes often carry the farthest. Imagine yourself astride a sturdy Highland pony as dawn unfolds over rolling moorland. The sky is a soft wash of pale greys and muted lavender, as if the world itself hesitates before the day's demands. Beneath you, the pony's broad hooves sink into soft moss and earth, then lift again in a deliberate rhythm that feels more like a heartbeat than a gallop. There is no haste in this motion, only a slow, deliberate progress that both soothes and steadies the spirit. Ewan MacLean sits lightly in the saddle, his woolen cloak draped across the animal's flank. You can almost feel the damp morning air clinging to him, the tiny droplets of moisture catching on the braided tassels of his cloak and glinting like scattered stars at the pony's sides. The scent of damp wool mingles with the earthy aroma rising from the path, a heady mix that grounds you in the present moment, reminding you that comfort is found in simple, tactile sensation. With each measured step, the pony's tack creaks softly, the leather faltering between complaint and familiarity. Listeners might detect the faint squeak of saddle straps adjusting under shifting weight, or the gentle clink of a bit against the bridle. These sounds, far from jarring, become a lullaby of sorts, the reassuring accompaniment to the steady drum of hooves on well-worn tracks. As you ride, the path unfurls like a narrow ribbon through swaying heather and tufted grasses. Purple blooms brush your knees, releasing bursts of wild perfume, that rise like whispered invitations. Occasionally, a stray stalk of thistle jabs at your boot, a subtle reminder that beauty in these hills often carries a hidden sting. You might feel a soft prick through your leather, nothing sharp enough to wound, but just enough to register, a playful nudge from the landscape itself. In the relative quiet, even the smallest sound commands attention. The pony's breath puffs in gentle clouds, each exhale visible in the cool air. When the animal shifts its head to nibble a low-hanging sprig of heather, there is a soft rustle, as though the plant is sighing under that light touch. Listeners draw in tandem with Ewan's own inhalations, syncing breath with beast and land, forming a quiet bond that transcends words. Yet, beneath this soothing cadence, attention runs like an undertow. Every thud of hoof on turf might echo to unseen ears. Redcoat patrols are known to scour these drovers' tracks, seeking whispers of rebellion in the wind. Imagine distant hoofbeats trailing your own, or the glint of scarlet fabric at a blind curve. In this gentle rhythm lies the potential for betrayal, and Ewan's grip on the reins tightens ever so slightly, an unconscious gesture that listeners feel in their own fingers as they mimic his cautious hold. The path dips and rises, each crown of grass revealing new vistas, rolling hills that fade into mist, a ribbon of river sparkling far below, and clusters of stone ruins standing like weathered sentinels. Every scene invites reflection, a reminder of the Highlands' ancient watchfulness. At times the pony hesitates at an especially boggy patch, hooves wobbling before finding firm ground. In those moments you catch a glimpse of Ewan's practiced calm. He leans forward, murmuring softly to his companion, coaxing it onward through uncertainty. As the minutes pass, the pony's steps remain unhurried and steady. There is humour, too, in the occasional wry glance Ewan casts at the animal's undignified trot when confronted with a particularly muddy puddle, his jaw lifting as if to say, "Next time, William, choose a less soggy route." In that shared awareness, listeners find warmth. Even in perilous times, a bond with an animal can kindle light-hearted respite. The road stretches on, each hoofbeat carrying Ewan closer to Stirling and the shadows that await there. Yet for now, you are held in this gentle tempo, the seamless cadence of pony and path, offering a tranquil counterpoint to the storm of loyalty and danger that surges just beyond the next ridge. In the soft, measured thud of each step, you discover a momentary refuge, a quiet affirmation that sometimes constancy in motion is all one needs to face uncertain horizons. The dusty drover's track unfurls ahead of you like a muted ribbon, flanked on one side by swaying heather, and on the other by low, wind-swept hedgerows. Punctuating this gentle landscape at regular intervals are moss-clad stone markers, tall, squat slabs of granite standing guard over a world both timeless and ever-changing. Each marker bears a Roman numeral etched into its face, now softened by centuries of wind, rain, and the ever-present touch of hands like yours. As you draw near the nearest milestone, the air seems to hold its breath. The numeral X emerges through a haze of green and grey lichens. 10 miles to Stirling, the seat of Jacobite intrigue and looming danger. Ewan MacLean dismounts briefly, leather boots sinking into the soft turf, and brushes a damp finger across the carved groove. The moss parts beneath his touch, revealing the faint shadow of gouged stone worn smooth by travellers' palms, seeking reassurance or marking passage. Listeners might almost feel the imprint of millennia of fingertips, each groove a low-relief map of hopes, fears, and hurried whispers carried along this very path. Beneath your palm, the stone is cool and textured, its geology a tapestry of flecked minerals and tiny pits where water once pooled. A faint tang of wet earth rises from the rock, mingling with the sweeter scent of gorse in bloom, sticky yellow flowers nodding politely in the breeze, as if offering silent congratulations for approaching mid-journey. You might notice the scraping rasp of your own nail against the carved edge, a sound so soft it seems nearly swallowed by the heather's quiet chorus. As Ewan steps back, the breezes sigh through the gorse and thistle at the roadside. Those soft murmurs carry voices of the lowlands, distant accents drifting across fields and hills like ghostly dispatches. A herdsman's Scottish burr, a trader's clipped English greeting carried on the wind, even the gentle tinkle of sheep bells echoing from far-off folds, all reminders that beyond these rolling moors lies a different world. 1 foot in the Highlands, 1 inch from soldiers' muskets, there is a subtle humour in the moment. Ewan straightens, patting his cloak where a tuft of moss clung unnoticed, and allows himself a wry smile. 10 miles, he muses, voice low enough that only the breeze might catch it. Or as the crow flies, if only crows carried messages. The jest hangs lightly in the air, a small reprieve from the gravity of his quest. Listeners feel the warmth of that human quip, a soft pulse against the cold stone stillness. Beyond the marker, the road stretches onward toward a distant rise crowned by the faint silhouette of Stirling spires. At this vantage the landscape unfolds. Meandering rivers wink in the growing light, clusters of stone cottages dot the valley, and smoke curls from distant chimneys. Benign signs of domestic life that stand in uneasy contrast to the secrets Ewan bears. Each step away from the milestone carries him further from the known comforts of home, and closer to the threshold of conspiracy. A gentle breeze tussles Ewan's hair as he remounts his pony, the animal shifting beneath him with mild impatience, or perhaps solidarity in his choice. As the pony's hooves find the next stretch of turf, listeners sense the lingering impression of the milestone's cool granite in their fingers, the echo of a numeral carved long before either of you walked this road. The marker's silent vigil continues, its moss and lichen ever renewing, its numeral a timeless reminder that distance travelled is measured not just in miles, but in the weight of purpose each journey carries. In the hush that follows, you become keenly aware of the road's subtle soundtrack, the swish of cloak against leather, the soft clop of pony hooves, the sigh of breeze through gorse, and somewhere behind, the milestone stands unmoved, its worn X, both a comfort and a warning. You are nearly 10 miles from safety, and even closer to the dangers that wait at Stirling's gates. In that moment, listeners drift in tandem with Ewan's steady pace, finding in stone and wind a quiet reflection on the miles yet to come. The steady clatter of hooves shift to the deliberate rumble of a linen-laden wagon on its own wheels. You're riding at dawn's cusp when the wagon emerges from a bend, a rectangular silhouette painted in muted greys against the heather-clad hills. Its sides are bulging with neatly folded bolts of English linen, cloth so crisp it seems to glow in the half-light, each roll tied with tan leather straps. The wagon's driver sits high on the bench, framed by a canvas cover, a picture of commercial confidence. Notice the driver's attire, a stiff, dark wool coat brushed to smoothness, its lapels pressed sharp enough to peel tape. His starched white collar frames a face creased by travel, windburn on cheekbones, lines etched by too many late-night negotiations. The contrast between his prime collar and the surrounding wilds is almost comedic, like a pigeon in a peacock's plumage. Yet beneath that refined exterior, you feel a sharper scrutiny. As the wagon rumbles past, Ewan MacLean tucks his cloak tighter against draught and danger. He senses more than sees the driver's eyes dart toward his plaid-wrapped form. That single glance is a quicksilver measure, familiarity or threat, tacksman or traitor. There is a flicker of suspicion in the merchant's gaze, a tightening at the jaw that betrays tension beneath courteous restraint. It's as if those bolts of linen, meant for far-off English markets, have eyes of their own, watching for Jacobite red in every fold of tartan. Listeners might hear the wooden wheels grinding over hidden stones, a muted protest carried on the wind. Then, as the wagon recedes, its clip-clop fades into a softer, more intimate sound, the creak and sigh of harness leather relaxing after bearing weight. That contrast from distant thunder of wheels to the private groan of straps mirrors the shift from public commerce to private suspicion. The scent of the wagon lingers, faintly of starch and flaxseed oil, a delicate perfume that doesn't quite mask the earthiness of hay beneath the linen. You catch a whiff of brine and tar, used to seal the wagon's joints from rain, mingling with the glaze of dew on the heather. It's a genteel bouquet, undeniably English, at odds with the peat-tinged breeze you've grown accustomed to. Listeners find themselves transported by scent, a reminder that even air can carry allegiance. Ewan's pony shifts restlessly, perhaps sensing its rider's tension. You might imagine the animal giving an exaggerated eye roll, as if to say, "Here we go again," another polite encounter with hidden peril. This small moment of levity underscores the absurdity of trust on these roads. The same wagon that offers friendly goods might deliver tidings of betrayal. As the horizon swallows the wagon's last glint of linen, a single echo remains, the soft jangle of metal rivets settling back into place. In that subtle sound, Ewan reads layers of meaning, contraband or camaraderie, profit or peril. The road ahead seems both longer and narrower, framed by the merchant's departing silhouette, which still lingers in the peripheral vision, like an unsolved riddle. You exhale slowly, the tension of the encounter melting into the vast openness around you. The horse's steps resume their unhurried tempo, reins slipping through Ewan's fingers with familiar ease. The hill slopes ahead reveal only empty space. No wagons, no spies. Yet, you carry the merchant's glance in your mind like a shadow at your back. Listeners drift with that weight, a silent question that moves as fluidly as the breeze through gorse. In that quiet aftermath, you become keenly aware of every nuance, the way your cloak flutters against the saddle, the distant bleat of sheep startled by your passage, the faint echo of linen friction fading into memory. And as you press on, the merchant's glance remains a tacit reminder. On this perilous road to Stirling, every stranger's gaze is currency, best spent with caution and a steady rein. Imagine pushing open the heavy door of the Crown's Swift, a drover's inn half swallowed by the shadows of its own history. As you step inside, the world outside, the heaving hills, the cold breeze, falls away, replaced by an atmosphere thick with the tang of burning peat and the sour sweetness of spilled ale. The low ceiling of sturdy oak beams looms overhead, each timber streaked black from countless fires. Those beams feel almost alive, their dark veins pulsing with the memory of gossip, laughter, and fights long since stilled. Ewan MacLean ducks his head to pass beneath the lowest of these timbers. His woolen cloak brushes against rough-hewn wood, stirring motes of dust that dance in stray rays of light, filtering through small, tapered windows. Listeners might picture those beams as ancient ribs holding up the roof, sagging just enough to whisper caution. Mind your head, and mind your words. The air here is a tapestry of aromas. The deep, earthy scent of peat-smoke wraps around you like a smoky shawl, while beneath it glimmers the richer note of malt grain crushed and boiled for last night's brewing. Intermittent wafts of spilled ale rise from darkened floorboards, carrying a yeasty, almost sour edge that speaks of too many mugs drained hastily in nervous toasts. Between these heavier scents drifts something more subtle, the faint trace of damp wool drying over an overturned bench, as though some traveller left his cloak there overnight. All around, wooden tables bear the scars of 1,000 dealings. Knife notches groove the surface in haphazard patterns. Some the result of dull blades, lazily scoring maps of distant fields. Others perhaps the unconcealed frustration of a soldier denied another mug. Circular rings mark where tankards once rested, staining the wood with concentric halos of tarnished pewter. Every indentation and ring reads like a chapter in a weathered chronicle, each mark a quiet testament to human presence. The inn's half-lit hush is broken by a distant cough, a brittle, reedy sound that reverberates like the toll of a small bell in a cavern. A chair scrapes against the floor, its legs whining in protest. These sounds, ordinary in any other context, here become drumbeats of danger, each one potentially cloaking a whispered warning or the click of hidden armor. Listeners feel the tension press in, as if the very walls lean closer to catch every syllable. Ewan's boots find an unsteady rhythm on the flagstone floor, the stones worn smooth by generations of boot heels. The soles of his shoes release tiny sparks of dust with each step, like embers drifting from the hearth. You might notice how the dim glow of lanterns casts dancing shadows on the ceiling, shadows that shift and flicker, menacing one moment and then almost playful the next, as though the rafters themselves are sharing a private joke at his expense. In one corner, a solitary cat slips between tables, its fur matted and singed at the ears. The survivor of some long-ago hearth, it pads across the room with deliberate ease, pausing to lick a fleck of spilled gruel. That small moment of feline nonchalance underscores the inn's dual nature, part sanctuary, part stage for potential treachery. Even the cat seems unfazed by the unseen eyes in the rafters. As Ewan settles onto a bench, scarred by knife and tankard alike, he leans forward, propping an elbow on the table's edge. The rough grain bites into his forearm, through his sleeve, a tactile reminder that here, comfort comes at the price of vigilance. Listeners share his heightened awareness. Every breath drawn is flavored with smoke and barley, every heartbeat syncing with the creak of floorboards and the murmur of voices you cannot quite make out. In that hushed, soot-dark sanctuary, time itself seems softened, slowed by the weight of history woven into every beam, table, and stone. And yet, beneath the oppressive quiet, the threat of discovery lingers like a half-light, never fully illuminated, never fully extinguished. A reminder that in the Crown's Swift, peace is as fragile as the thin layer of soot on those ancient timbers. Imagine a sturdy tavern table before you, its surface scarred by generations of travellers' elbows and spilled drinks. A pewter bowl is placed gently in front of Ewan MacLean, its inside rough with grooves, where a coarse wooden pestle once swirled. Steam rises in lazy curling wisps from a mound of thick oat porridge, its surface mottled with a sheen of hot fat and flecks of unspun grain. The porridge's fragrance is humble but hearty, warm oats softened by water, with a whisper of salt that suggests last season's barley, now gone brittle in storehouses. Ewan reaches for a thick oatcake, flat, round, and oddly comforting. You can almost feel its weight in your hands, dense, earth-toned, flecked with husks that crackle under gentle pressure. He breaks off a corner, and it snaps with a quiet satisfaction, releasing the smell of toasted grain. Listeners might notice the tactile pleasure in that simple snap, the way coarse crumbs scatter across the table like tiny confetti, each piece a reminder of home and hearth. Beside the bowl sits a mug of ale, its pewter surface slightly warm from cradle and cradle alone. The ale itself is a murky amber, its surface rippled by bubbles that cling stubbornly at the edges. Ewan lifts the mug in both hands, feeling the chill seep into his palms even as the mug's weight offers a steady reassurance. With a slow tilt he brings the rim to his lips, and the first sip is a gentle sting, a burst of fermented barley that blossoms across his tongue before fading to a bitter aftertaste. There is an undertone of something sharper, perhaps the tang of wild yeast or the acrid kiss of candle smoke that drifts in from a nearby lantern. As the ale slides down, he allows himself a faint, wry thought. If only courage were this easy to swallow. The humour is subtle, a quiet acknowledgement that a drink may warm the body, but cannot steady the spirit beneath a scarlet sky. Listeners feel the echo of his breath as he exhales, tasting ale's sour fire mingled with the lingering whisper of smoked tallow. His eyes, however, are far from comfort. They flick to a scarlet-coated soldier, seated a few paces away, nursing his own drink in a pewter tankard. The soldier's posture is overly relaxed, as though he wants you to think he's merely pausing for a friendly pint. Yet every detail betrays his watchfulness. His bayonet, seethed at his side, catches the tavern's dim light and glints too brightly, as if it knows exactly the moment to spring forth. Listeners might feel a subtle prickle of tension at that glint, a silent alarm in muscle memory. The soldier's gaze meets Ewan's in a fleeting exchange, eyes narrowing, lips pressing together as though in thought. It lingers long enough to question loyalty. Friend, foe, or fickle profiteer, eyeing a handsome reward. In that glance the tavern's warm ambience falters, and the fermented barley taste sours further, as though each swallow is weighed by suspicion. Ewan offers a polite nod, the kind that might pass for casual greeting in friendlier circumstances. He returns to his porridge, scooping another mouthful with the oatcake's flat edge. The thick grain slides across his tongue, its bland warmth a steadier companion than the ale's bite. Listeners sense the slow mechanical comfort of chewing rhythmic grounding and the way each crumb seems to anchor him more firmly in the moment. Behind the soldier, the inn's shadows undulate. A gust of wind rattles a shuttered window, drawing the soldier's attention away momentarily. Ewan uses the chance to sip again, the ale's head washing over his tongue, settling his nerves in tiny waves. He notices the stooped back of a bored serving girl, balancing a tray of empty mugs with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to tension's sharp edge. Her eyes flick briefly to the soldier too, then flick back to the next table, as if the tavern itself were a small stage, and every patron performed a part. In this ebb and flow oatcakes, ale, glances, sighs, listeners find themselves suspended between warmth and weariness. Each sensory detail intertwines: the porridge's dense comfort, the ale's sharp tang, the candle smoke's acrid curl, the soldier's glinting bayonet, and as Ewan allows the slow rhythm of eating and drinking to steady him, the underlying unease remains a faint drumbeat, reminding you that in the crown's swift even bread and broth come flavoured with danger. Imagine settling deeper into the smoky gloom of the crown's swift, the echoes of hoofbeats and ale-stained benches, receding into a low rumble. Your gaze drifts to a shadowed alcove, where two figures sit hunched close beneath a single sputtering candle. The flame wavers, sending thin tongues of light, dancing across rough-hewn walls, and you sense that each flicker could expose more than just parchment. It might reveal loyalties better left concealed. From that corner drifts the soft, insistent scratch of quill on parchment. It's a delicate sound, almost polite in its restraint. A scratch, scratch, punctuated by the quiet scrape of elbows brushing against wood. You can almost feel the quill's nib stained dark by ink, pointed and precise, lifting and pressing, gliding over fibrous sheets that tremble with each stroke. The scent of fresh ink mingles with the tavern's usual bouquet of spilled ale and peat smoke, creating a strangely elegant perfume amid the rough warmth of common company. Ewan MacLean sits a pace away, posture taut beneath his cloak, senses attuned to every nuance. He notices how the two strangers exchange letters, as though handling fragile eggshells. The first folds the parchment with measured care, sliding it across scarred table boards. The second breaks the seal, a soft snap that might as well be a pistol shot in this tense chamber. Listeners might imagine the soft crinkle of the seal coming undone, the crack of wax surrendering secrets into the open. Then, in hushed tones just above a whisper, fragments of their conversation drift across the room, catching on Ewan's ear like a trap springing shut. He hears bounty, a world weighed in gold crowns and blood price, followed by deserter, a term that tastes of betrayal and desperate flight, and then midnight rendezvous, words that hang in the air like a gauntlet thrown, promising darkness and danger under moonless skies. Each syllable slices through the inn's murmur with surgical precision, and you, listening in shared hush, feel your pulse quicken, as though you might be next on their list. Subtle observational humor ripples beneath the tension. Ewan notes that one of the conspirators uses a chipped mug as a blotter, leaving ink-smudged rings on its side, as if to say, even traitors can't afford proper writing equipment. The other absent-mindedly taps a dagger's hilt twice, before remembering to keep still. These small gestures humanize the high-stakes intrigue, reminding listeners that even in the cloak and dagger world, habit and absent-mindedness persist. Above the scratch of quill and stolen words, the tavern's usual soundtrack continues. A cough here, the scrape of chairs there, the low murmur of travellers swapping tall tales. Yet now each ordinary sound seems thickened by menace. A clerk polishing a tankard nearby catches Ewan's gaze for a fraction of a second, and he wonders if that rinse of water is merely to clean dishware, or to flood away fingerprints of treason. Ewan shifts slightly, the wool of his cloak brushing against the bench, and the scratch of cloth against wood registers like a confession. He allows the murmur of conversation to wash over him in waves, steadying his breath as he measures risk with a practiced calm. Listeners, too, find themselves inhaling slowly, each breath laced with candle smoke, ink, and the faintest tinge of adrenaline. As the candle gutters, the conspirators fold their missives and tuck them beneath cloaks, as though hiding snakes in folds of fabric. The rustle of paper subsides, but its echoes linger, an invisible thread weaving through the room. Ewan catches one final phrase: cross the river before dawn. The words a map of peril, etched in a few fatal syllables. In that moment of suspended silence, you become keenly aware of every detail. The warmth of your own breath, the solidity of the table beneath your palms, the low groan of floorboards as someone shifts, and as you draw your cloak tighter, the knowledge settles in your bones. In this inn, every whisper is a potential verdict, every exchanged glance a ledger of judgment. Listeners drift with that weight, carried on the scratch of quill and the soft secrecy of midnight messages, hearts aligned with the slow, relentless rhythm of hidden war. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit chamber just beyond the inn's common room, where a single lantern hangs from a wrought iron hook, its flame steady yet subdued. The air here is cooler, tinged with the lingering scent of embers and spilled ale, and the low hum of conversation through rough wooden walls feels distant, as though you stand inside a living vault. Ewan MacLean reaches into the folds of his cloak and draws forth a letter bound in thick vellum, the colour of aged parchment, pale as dawn mist yet firm under his fingertips. The document is heavier than ordinary paper, its weight a promise of substance and consequence. You can almost feel the parchment's slight grain and the gentle resistance as he unfolds its edges, careful not to disturb the precious seal. At the heart of the letter lies a deep red globule of wax, its surface glossy and unbroken. The seal bears the Stuart horseshoe emblem, meticulously impressed so that every horseshoe nail and curve stands in crisp relief. As Ewan turns the dispatch in his hand, the lantern's light catches the wax's sheen, transforming it into a tiny beacon of treason. Listeners sense the seal's chill clearly. It is cooler than the room, a cold hardness that presses into his palm like a whisper from the past. As he cradles the letter, The wax's firmness sends a shiver up his sleeve, a tremor that feels both cautionary and resonant. It is as though the wax itself carries the weight of every promise sealed alongside it. Clandestine meetings in moonlit glens, the hush of oaths beneath rowan trees, and the distant thunder of musket fire awaiting James Stuart's banner. The seal's coldness is almost palpable, a tactile reminder that rebellion demands both courage and blood. The parchment crackles faintly as he adjusts his grip. The sound so soft it might be the rustle of dying leaves on a peat bog. You might notice how the vellum's texture contrasts with his rough woolen gloves, where the fabric is pliant and springy. The parchment is stiff, unyielding, worthy of the gravity it contains. Each minuscule crease holds stories. The hands that penned every line in careful script. The candle's flicker casting uneven shadows as words took shape. The repeated folding that carried the letter from heart to hand. In that hush, subtle observational humour finds its place. Ewan glances at the stamp and muses inwardly. If only they'd sealed this with a friendly handshake instead of wax, it might offend less. It's a fleeting thought, a wry concession that ceremony can sometimes obscure intent. Yet here, ceremony is the very lifeblood of subversion. He brings the letter closer, his breath visible in tiny plumes, as he senses the wax warming ever so slightly against his palm. That warmth feels almost sacrilegious, softer than expected, as though the seal recognizes his purpose and yields in reluctant partnership. Listeners feel that communion, the living heat of resolve meeting centuries-old wax, forging a silent covenant between sender and bearer. Behind the seal lies the letter's folded heart, its inner words hidden until the seal's crack. Ewan resists the temptation to pry. He knows that opening it prematurely would betray both craft and cause. In that restraint you sense a quiet dignity, one that acknowledges the letter's power not only to convey orders, but to carry the fragile heartbeat of rebellion itself. Finally, he tucks the dispatch back into his cloak, pressing it against his chest, where it rests near a beating heart. The seal's cool hardness lingers in memory, a small, insistent reminder of the stakes at play. And as he steps back into the corridor's muted light, listeners share in the weight of unfolded history, knowing that within those fragile folds lies not just ink and wax, but the promise of whispered plots and the perilous pulse of revolution. You step into the back of a creaking drover's cart, just as dawn's pale light begins to seep through a canopy of canvas. The narrow space is dominated by two hefty wooden barrels, their stout staves bound with iron hoops. Inside each barrel rests salted herring, slick, silver fish packed tightly in brine, and layers of coarse salt. The barrels exude a musty tang of cured fish and perspired wood, an odour so pungent it seems to coat the tongue even before you speak. Ewan MacLean kneels beside the nearest barrel, the cart's dim interior illuminated only by slender beams of morning light slipping through cracks in the roof. Beneath the barrel, he presses down on a loose floorboard the size of a shoebox. This board was carved and replaced by sympathetic hands long ago, pine planks, smoothed at the edges, but still bearing the faint marks of adze and chisel. As he lifts the panel, a soft must of fish oil rises up to greet him, an intimate aroma that clings stubbornly to cloth and skin, like an unwelcome yet familiar guest. Listeners might feel the rough grain of pine against their fingertips, the tiny ridges that rub away skin's softness with every movement. The compartment below yawns open like a hidden alcove, its interior dark but for the smeared residue of brine on the wood's underside. It smells of salt and something deeper, perhaps the memory of countless fish pressed into this hollow, each contributing to the pungent chorus of ocean and sweat. Ewan reaches inside, his cloak sleeves brushing against the barrel's damp staves. You can almost hear the soft scrape of leather against wood, the whispered friction that announces every intentional motion. His fingers close around the crimson-sealed dispatch. For a heartbeat, the letter's wax seal and stiff vellum rest against the residue of brine, two worlds converging in secret, the refined weight of rebellion meeting the raw honesty of salted fish. As he slides the dispatch into its cradle, the compartment's edges catch slightly on the wax seal, and listeners sense the tiniest hitch, a whisper of danger. Ewan eases the letter deeper, mindful of the seal's fragility. The parchment nestles among the brine-darkened wood, like a rare flower, planted in unlikely soil. A faint drip from the barrel's rim splashes onto the plank, a solitary raindrop in a sea of uncertainty. He lowers the false floorboard with careful precision. The panel clicks into place, a quiet lock that seems to swallow the musty fish aroma whole. Listeners feel the weight of that microcosm, the letter now hidden inches beneath salted herring, a heartbeat's distance from discovery. Then, a sudden jostle. The cart lurches as it traverses a hidden rut in the path. The barrels groan in protest, shifting slightly, and you hear the oak staves creak against their iron hoops. The floorboard quivers under Ewan's boot, a muted tremor that feels like a nudge from fate. Every sway threatens to crack the letter's seal, or tilt the barrels enough to spill salt and brine into the compartment below. In that moment, routine travel becomes a silent gamble, each bump of the cart a question posed to chance. There is subtle humor in the scenario. Ewan's mind drifts briefly to imagining what a redcoat inspector might think upon opening the cart. Salted herring just the usual, sir, as he coughs to mask the fish oil before discovering the real cargo. That fleeting thought brings a wry smile Ewan's lips, even as he steadies the cart with a firm hand on the nearest barrel. As the wagon heels into a gentle incline, listeners sense the cart's rhythmic sway becoming almost hypnotic, a lullaby of commerce and conspiracy. The squeak of leather harnesses punctuates the motion, each note a reminder that the world outside remains oblivious to the dispatch hidden below. Through the barrel's oak walls and the floorboard's secret hinge, the heartbeat of rebellion rides onward towards Stirling. In that suspended moment between oak and oil, salt and secrecy, you, the listener, share in the quiet danger. Each measured breath, each muted creak, and each stifled chuckle weaves into the tapestry of Ewan's journey, reminding you that in the game of covert dispatches, survival depends on a steady hand, and the patience to move through shadows with unwavering calm. The sky above shifts from the pale apricot of dusk into a deeper slate, as if the very heavens are sighing beneath the weight of nightfall. The world around you softens, its colours bleeding into one another. Hills that shimmered green now slip into muted charcoal, and the day's bustle fades into a hush broken only by Ewan's measured breathing and the distant toll of church bells summoning souls to vespers. Ewan MacLean rides along a narrow dirt track that threads through fields edged by thorny hedgerows. His woolen cloak, damp still from earlier mists, brushes against the dense tangle of hawthorn and bramble. Each thorn bites softly into the fabric, sending a series of tingling pokes along his sleeves. You might feel the faint tug on coarse wool, the prick of a barbed stem as it snags and then releases with a whispered snick, like nature's own Morse code warning him to stay vigilant. The hedgerow's blooms, gorse and wild roses, catch the last sunbeams in fleeting moments of gilded glory. Golden petals glow briefly, as if set aflame, before the light retreats and the blooms slump back into shadow. There is a quiet poetry in that transition, a gentle acknowledgement that even the brightest beauty must yield to the gathering dusk. Listeners sense the bittersweet grace of those blossoms, brief brilliance followed by inevitable obscurity. Ahead, the track dips slightly, and the soles of Ewan's boots crunch against a scattering of loose stones and dried earth. With each step, or in this case each hoofbeat, the path seems to swallow sound, leaving only the distant church bells and the occasional rustle of small creatures stirring in underbrush. The bells ring out in solemn cadence, a slow peal that travels across fields and moors, anchoring his pulse to their rhythm. 1, 2, 3, each reverberation a heartbeat shared between man and stone tower, calling the faithful to communion while reminding a fugitive that time is both ally and adversary. In this dim half-light, shadows merge and stretch, pooling at the base of hedges and creeping into the track's ruts. What was once a gentle curve of earth now appears as a dark mouth waiting to swallow the unwary. Listeners become attuned to every subtle shift in greys and blacks. Is that tuft of grass mere foliage, or the folded cloak of an awaiting scout? Does that mossy stone hide a snare, or is it simply moss? Each question pulses like a metronome beat in Ewan's mind, each answer suspended in the gloaming. A sudden breeze stirs, carrying the tang of damp leaves and distant peat smoke. It rushes through the hedgerow, shaking loose a cascade of tiny petals and dead leaves that drift down like confetti at a silent celebration. There is a note of irony in that gentle shower, beauty and decay mingling overhead as if to remind you that life and death walk hand in hand on paths such as this. Ewan pauses to survey his surroundings. He lifts gloved fingers to his lips and inhales deeply. The brambly scent of hedges, the metallic bite of approaching cold, and beneath it all, the faint savour of salt from that hidden herring barrel. In that inhale, listeners feel the layering of the world's textures, each aroma a thread woven into the tapestry of danger. He resumes his journey, and each hoof rise sends a soft thump into the stillness. The track's ruts guide him forward, as though the path itself is urging him to press on despite the gathering shadows. Yet every push of the pony's shoulder against his leg, every shift of the reins, carries the unspoken acknowledgement that at any moment, betrayal could emerge from the hedge's depth, perhaps a disguised informant stepping forth, or a redcoat patrol rounding the bend. As the twilight deepens into indistinct blue, the hedgerow's thorns continue their quiet work, brushing and scratching until Ewan's cloak bears a constellation of tiny snags. It is a subtle memento of his passage, proof that even the land itself appreciates the gravity of his secret mission. Listeners drift with that sensation, boots and hooves and hearts echoing in unison with the church bell's far-off call. And so, in the soft, restrained hush of hedgerow shadows at twilight, the road to Stirling extends before him, a ribbon of uncertain promise, edged by thorn and darkness, where every breath, every step, and every passing shadow holds the weight of fate. Imagine pushing open a narrow, iron-bound door and stepping down into Stirling Castle's hidden undercroft. A gentle chill greets you, rich with the scent of ancient stone, mildew lingering in corners where water seeps through mortar, and the faint, acrid tang of recently extinguished torches still clings to the air. Overhead, a series of rounded arches span the chamber like the ribs of some immense, long-forgotten beast, each curve hewn from grey granite so smooth that your eyes are drawn to the faint glint of moisture on its surface. As Ewan MacLean slips through the threshold, his boots kiss worn flagstones with a muted thud, each step measured, respectful of the century-old floor that has borne the weight of soldiers, servants, and tonight, conspirators. Listeners feel the cool solidity beneath their feet, sense the slight give of damp mortar under each stone, and note how the arches seem to lean in ever so slightly, as if eager to hear the secrets soon to be spoken. In the chamber's centre, beeswax candles rest in simple iron sconces, their flames dancing with slow deliberation. The light casts ovals of gold upon the rough-hewn walls, surfaces marked by chisel scars and time-worn grooves. Shadows quiver at the candle's edge, elongating into ghostly fingers that stroke the rock in unison with hushed conversation. Ewan pauses long enough to appreciate the subtle artistry, the way one candle flickers more boldly, revealing a hidden carving of a stag's head etched generations ago, or how another guttering flame spills molten wax onto the iron base, forming a tiny gleaming puddle that catches the soft light like a second star. The conspirators gather on low benches fashioned from oak planks, their surfaces smoothed by countless elbows and the passing of tankards. Each bench bears notches and shallow gouges, vague maps of past encounters, playful carvings, or perhaps battle plans quickly erased. Listeners might catch the scratch of a dagger's edge caught in wood grain, or the subtle indentation where someone's knee pressed too hard in anticipation. A soft murmur rises as Ewan finds his place among them. Cloaks brush against the benches, with a sound like silk sliding over metal, quiet, deliberate, respectful. He settles, feeling the bench's slight give, the rough wood grains nestling into his coarse trousers. At the same moment, boots shift on stone, the barely audible thud acting as a punctuation to settling bodies, a collective inhalation before the vow. Above the cough of whispered voices, the archers amplify every nuance. A dropped coin would clang like a warning bell, a swallowed breath might echo like a crack in armor. In this hushed acoustics, even the most mundane sounds, the rattle of a flask, the soft clink of a signet ring, take on grave significance. Listeners lean in, attuned to the subtlest creak of leather or rustle of parchment, knowing each noise is part of the night's unfolding tapestry. Subtle observational humor flits through the gloom. Ewan notes that one conspirator, a burly laird with a chronic cough, manages to sound as though he's clearing the air for grand announcements rather than announcing the plague. Another adjusts his breeches with such exaggerated care that it seems he's dressing for a ball, not a plot. These small details anchor the scene in human authenticity. Even in the most solemn gatherings, habit and vanity endure. As candlelight pools around them, the group's outline wavers between clarity and abstraction, their shapes merging with stone pillars and receding into the cellar's shadowed corners. Listeners feel the tension in the air, history in the making, tempered by centuries of dust and damp. Each voice, each glint of steel at a belt, each breath caught against the cold stone coalesces into a single-purpose rebellion. In that vaulted stillness between arch and murmur, stone and flame, Ewan settles deeper into the moment. He senses the weight of every rounded arch above, each one a silent guardian of secrets too potent for daylight, and as the soft scrape of cloaks and thud of boots blend into the chamber's living hum, listeners drift with the conspirators' quiet resolve, carried onward by the slow, steadfast rhythm of stone-born echoes and candlelit vows. The chamber's hush gives way to a chorus of voices gathered around an aged granite table. Overhead, candle flames tremble, casting warm pools of light that flicker like wavering promises. Each conspirator leans in, their breath clouding in the cool air as they ready themselves to bind words to steel and blood. Across the table, the first tacksman lifts his goblet of honeyed mead and murmurs a Gaelic toast. Slan Sentinmoth. The phrase rolls off his tongue in smooth, lilting cadence, the vowels like soft bells tolling in the night. Listeners sense the measured weight behind each syllable, a blessing both for health and for the strength of shared purpose. The word hangs in the air, tasting faintly of peat-smoke and sweet barley, before being swallowed by the room's low murmur. In response, a lowland laird, boots planted firmly on the flagstones, clears his throat and swigs his own drink with decisive emphasis. Then, in clipped English, he issues a curt, "By God's teeth, we'll have our way." The words snap through the Gaelic silkiness, like a blade's edge, shifting the mood from reverent to resolute. His accent is precise, each consonant a hammer strike. By God's teeth. Listeners feel the firmness behind his command, a counterweight to the Gaelic's fluid grace. As the echoes of curses and oaths settle, another voice rises, rich and resonant, with the dark tenor of Gaelic. "Lees are nanamenta," he intones, invoking the souls of their forebears to witness and vouchsafe their vows. You might notice how that phrase spreads warmth through the chamber, even as it carries a chill of obligation, ancestral duty pressed into the present. The candles flare as if honoring the invocation, and you sense the stone walls responding in silent agreement. Yet the next interruption is a sharp expletive in English. Blast the redcoats and their blasted gold. The speaker's words come out as a single breath, punctuated by the snap of his gauntleted fist on the table. The phrase crackles like embers, heated, immediate, and listeners feel a subtle shudder in the air, as though the chamber itself recoils at the intensity. Between these moments, subtle humour weaves its way through the solemnity. One conspirator, still half blind from candle glare, knocks his elbow into his neighbour's arm. The neighbour hisses an English epithet, "Bloody hell, watch it," then catches himself and adds under his breath in Gaelic, "Agari Tuel," pleading for silence. The gentle clash of tongues, one firing curses, the other whispering peacemaking pleas, underscores the precarious balance between chaos and control. As the plot unfolds, voices shift seamlessly between languages. "A midwinter night's storm won't break us," the Highland chief says in English, leaning on a clay pipe stem. He then switches back to Gaelic to detail their plan of assault. "Bid sinna tai him maragawith. We will come like the wind." His Gaelic flows like rushes in a stream, while his English rides in on the blunt back of hard consonants. Listeners trace those shifting inflections, picking up on alliances shaped as much by dialect as by blood. In that flow of Gaelic invocations and English curses, each accent reveals something vital: the Highlander's fierce pride, grounded in centuries of clan loyalty; the Lowlander's cool precision honed by commerce and politics. Together they form a tapestry of speech, knots binding disparate threads, each dialect lending colour and depth to the whole. By the time the final oath is uttered, a low, grave Gaelic vow to strike at dawn, listeners are steeped in the ritual's slow, deliberate rhythm. The cadence of Slantimoth lingers alongside the echo of sharp English expletives, weaving a sonic tapestry that carries both the weight of history and the spark of revolution. And as the candlelight softens and the voices drop to muffled undertones, you feel the room settle into purpose, each word a step on the precarious path toward rebellion. The vaulted chamber's dancing candlelight pulls in its corners, throwing the room into gentle chiaroscuro. There, in the farthest, shadowed niche, stands Lady Isabel Drummond, utterly still. Her dark tartan cloak fans around her like spilled ink, the deep greens and blacks of the weave swallowing stray glimmers of flame. listeners might sense the cloak's weight, woven wool that has weathered court halls and Highland storms alike, settling in soft folds at her feet. Atop her shoulders sits a mantle of calm authority. Beneath the hood's shadow, her face is pale and composed, each feature refined by lineage and steeled by necessity. In the candlelight, her eyes gleam with measured intent, sharp emerald pools, reflecting the flicker of flames, yet unmoved by their caprice. Those eyes hold a silent calculus, weighing every oath, every whispered vow, as though each carries the potential to reshape fate. Beside her, a leather-bound ledger rests upon a low pedestal, its edges worn smooth by attentive hands. The scent of aged parchment and ink drifts up, a scholarly perfume amid the earthy aromas of smoke and leather. Lady Isabel lifts her gauntleted hand with precise restraint. The metal plates shimmer quietly against her smooth sleeve, articulating at each knuckle with soft clicks that punctuate the room's hush. Listeners hear that gentle percussive note, click, click, as she closes the ledger's cover, sealing within it accounts of clandestine funds, lists of sympathizers, and coded correspondences that sustain the Jacobite cause. Her gown of fine silk rustles faintly beneath her plaid, a sound as soft as a wisp of wind through heather. The fabric, pale as moonlight, peeks out in slender folds where the tartan parts. That flash of silken white is an unspoken reminder of her station. Not a rough tacksman, nor a hardened warrior, but a noble woman whose influence travels on whispered counsel and written word. The silk's smooth whisper contrasts with the ledger's solid thunk and the cloak's muffled swish, weaving a subtle tapestry of textures that speak of dual worlds, courtly refinements, and Highland exigencies. When she finally speaks, her voice is low, refined, and unfailingly clear, each word crisp as a fresh paper edge. The hush that descends is immediate, as conspirators lean forward to catch her understated wisdom. Her tone carries no overt demand, rather, each instruction unfurls like a banner, purposeful, dignified, impossible to disregard. Listeners might feel a ripple of respect, even deference, as her soft syllables drift through the vaulted arches and settle into the stone. There is an unspoken humour in her quiet command. A grizzled laird murmurs directions, only to find himself pausing mid-sentence under her gaze. A gentle reminder that in this conclave she navigates power as deftly as any soldier wields a sword. The room's tension coils tighter at her slightest nod, as if the very air concedes to her calmer alignment. At her feet, flickers of candlelight reveal that her cloak's hem bears the faintest trace of mud, proof that she traversed rain-slick paths to stand in solidarity with rebels. That flash of earth-stained wool is a testament. Her quiet authority is rooted not only in birthright, but in courageous action. Listeners catch that detail and feel it settle in their bones, the recognition that true power often manifests in steady conviction rather than thunderous decree. As the conspirators turn their attention back to strategy, voices merging again in Gaelic oaths and English curses, Lady Isabel remains their silent axis. Her presence anchors the meeting's fraying edges, forging unity in a room fraught with risk. In that vaulted stillness, you carry away the memory of her measured gaze and the soft click of gauntlet on leather. A reminder that in the hush of midnight councils, it is often the gentlest, most composed voice that guides the fiercest rebellions toward dawn. Imagine the vaulted cellar settling into an expectant hush, candle flames drifting in their sconces, as though pausing to listen. The air is cool and tinged with the tang of spent wax and damp flagstones. At the head of a rough-hewn oak table, the Earl of Mar stands tall, a figure carved from granite and resolve. He lifts a folded sheet of creamy vellum, its edges slightly warped by moisture, and clears his throat, a single soft rumble that seems to awaken the chamber's deepest shadows. Then, in measured cadence, he begins. The Latin rolls off his tongue in clear, sonorous tones, each syllable pronounced with deliberate gravity. Joe, he intones first, the D, a soft percussion against stone, the yo lingering like a faint echo in a cavern. Listeners might imagine the weight of that word, God, hanging overhead, a vaulted canopy of divine witness. He pauses briefly, allowing the chamber's hush to swell, as though the very walls lean in to catch the next phrase. Next comes me, spoken with quiet certainty. The vowel resonates in the chest, a personal claim woven into the cosmic assertion. It is at once humble and audacious. God is my strength, one feels the syllable lodge in the breast, a heartbeat of faith that courses through bone and blood. The hush deepens, broken only by the distant drip of condensation, or the faint crackle of candle flame. Finally, Va, waited with purpose. The V slides like a blade through the silence. The Ort concludes in a low, sustained hum. Together, Dieu me va, God is my strength, elevates cracked parchment into something sacred, as though the ink itself breathes with divine fire. Candlelight flickers across the vellum surface, revealing the mottled texture of animal skin and the careful ink strokes of a practiced hand. Listeners see the motto etched in dark ink, each letter a testament to conviction stronger than any seal or sword. As the Earl lowers the parchment, the chamber remains motionless. The silence is profound, so complete that it seems to ring in the ears, a sonic imprint left by Latin's long lifeline. Here, in that pregnant pause, musty parchment transforms into a battle standard, its weight immeasurable and immediate. Dieu me va no longer reads as mere motto, but hums as living invocation, calling every heart present to unity and courage. There is a subtle flourish of observational humour in the stillness. A single tallow drop plops onto the stone floor, breaking the silence with an almost embarrassed plip. An accidental footnote to a moment of deliberate solemnity. Yet even that tiny sound feels reverent, a quiet punctuation beneath the thunder of Latin. Listeners sense the echoes of history, how these same words once emboldened knights and courtiers, how they travelled through centuries of whispered prayer and shouted battle cry. Behind the Earl, the vaulted arches ring with latent power, shadows twist in the candlelight, and the stone seems to exhale, as though releasing centuries of secrets into the room. The conspirators, clad in tartan and leather, lean forward, their faces lit by the soft glow. In their eyes, you may catch the spark of understanding. This isn't polite ceremony, but a binding oath. The spark that, once struck, cannot be unkindled. When the Earl finally lowers the parchment and replaces it upon the table, the Latin words linger like incense in the air. Listeners carry the resonance of Dieu me va in their bones. Each syllable a steady drumbeat for the promise and peril ahead. And as the chamber exhales into conversation once more, you feel the quiet power of ancient language at work, transforming a simple motto into the very heartbeat of rebellion. Imagine the Earl of Mar leaning over the table, candlelight gleaming on his gauntleted fingers, as he lifts a rich, scarlet lump of sealing wax. Its surface is glossy and smooth, like the heart of a ripe berry polished by night air. Listeners might almost taste the promise, and the peril held within that vivid hue, a colour carried in the memory of every fallen standard. He positions a folded vellum letter beneath a small, iron seal, a horseshoe emblem, bearing the Stuart insignia. The seal's handle is cold against his palm, iron-etched with minute flourishes, tiny beetles, Celtic knots, and the faint initials IR for Jacobus Rex. The wax, still mollified by gentle heat from a concealed taper, yields under the seal's weight with a sharp, decisive crack. That single sound slices through the chamber's hush, punctuating the air with authority, as if the wax itself acknowledges its own importance. As the seal presses deeper, the wax surrenders, spreading into the horseshoe's carved recess. You hear the faint squeak of pigmented wax sliding over parchment, a subtle siren's call that draws eyes from every corner of the stone room. Listeners sense the tactile resonance, a tiny quake that travels up the seal and settles in marrow and muscle, binding all who bear witness to a shared compact. When the seal releases, the horseshoe shape stands proud in relief, crimson against cream, a symbol both simple and profound. Its glossy sheen catches stray beams of candlelight, sending a rich red flash into the conspirators' faces. In that moment, the emblem seems to pulse, as if infused with a heartbeat of its own. The glow is quick, almost shy, before the seal's colour deepens to a sombre matte under the Earl's reverent gaze. A fleeting scent drifts upward, a faint metallic tang reminiscent of freshly struck coin or unspent lead. It mingles with the cellar's damp stone aroma, creating a curious perfume that tastes of promise and threat. Listeners inhale that scent as though tasting a premonition, sharp, immediate, impossible to ignore. Ewan watches the seal's crimson horseshoe, feeling its gravity settle into his bones. He notes its curves, every nail hole a silent vow, every arc a promise of protection or peril. In that small emblem, he discerns the power to unite fractured clans under one banner, or, conversely, to condemn them to the gallows, as traitors to the crown. The stakes drift into focus. Wax and iron here eclipse the sharpest dirk. Subtle observational humour ripples in the charged air. The Earl, despite his dignity, allows a single bead of wax to flick free, landing on his cuff with a soft plop. He brushes it away with a wry flick of his gauntlet, as though chiding the wax for drawing undue attention. This small human moment, an accident in the midst of solemn ritual, draws a knowing half-smile from Ewan, a reminder that no matter how weighty the ceremony, human hands remain prone to slips. With the horseshoe sealed and the letter secured, the Earl lifts the document as though it is both the world and its undoing. Listeners feel the shift in the chamber's current. The seal's quiet authority saturates the air, weaving a web of loyalty that hums beneath the muttered oaths to come. The wax-cased letter becomes more than a conveyance of strategy. It becomes the pulse of a cause. As the candlelight quivers, the seal's edges catch the glow again, illuminating those tiny iron flourishes in brisk relief. Each conspirator leans forward, drawn by the emblem's power, as if it were a lodestone guiding the knight's unfolding path. In that glow, you can almost see the shadow of future battles cast upon the walls, battles inked in wax and waged beneath borrowed banners. And so, in the simple act of pressing molten wax into heraldic form, the knight's promise crystallizes. Listeners drift with the weight of that crimson horseshoe, its glossy sheen and sharp crack echoing in memory. An emblem that binds hearts, defines loyalties, and seals fates in a single, irrevocable imprint. Imagine the Earl of Mar laying aside the sealed dispatch upon the oaken table, its crimson horseshoe gleaming in the flickering light. In that space left by the ritual, attendants step forward bearing pewter goblets brimming with mead, amber liquid that catches each candle's glow like captured sunshine. The goblets pass hand to hand with deliberate slowness, the metal cool against palms newly freed from gauntlets. And you sense the importance of this small ceremony. Vows are to follow, and mead's honeyed warmth will lubricate both speech and spirit. As you lift your own goblet, the aroma rises to meet you first, the sweet headiness of fermenting honey, spiced faintly with hops and a whisper of wild flowers. It is a perfume that mingles comfort and excitement. Like the promise of dawn after a long, candlelit vigil, listeners might close their eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply as the scent swirls through their senses, teasing memories of summer hives and lazy afternoons in sunlit orchards. The first swallow is gentle, almost teasing, not a gulp, but a slow sip that allows the mead to flow across the tongue. You taste its complex layers, the initial sweetness of honey dissolving into a subtle warmth, followed by a gentle bite of fermentation, then a soft finish that lingers like a secret. The dank cellar air, heavy with the scent of stone and extinguished wax, now carries a lighter note as if the honey smoke has chased away some of the gloom. Ewan MacLean feels the mead's warmth spread from his throat into his chest, a comforting glow that unfurls with each heartbeat. With that warmth comes confidence. Tongues loosen, shoulders relax, and the conspirators lean in closer, drawn by both the liquor's coaxing and the gravity of the moment. Listeners sense this shift too, as the mead's sweetness fills the room. The hush ripples into murmured anticipation. A subtle, almost imperceptible humour threads through the gathering. One hardened soldier, unused to such sweet fare, sips with exaggerated deliberation, his brows knitting in puzzled delight. He half chokes, then grins sheepishly, murmuring, "By my troth, I did not know honey could burn so gently." The remark draws a soft, shared chuckle, an ember of camaraderie glowing in the cellar's half-light. As the goblets continue their journey, passing from hand to hand like a sacred baton, the conspirators offer quiet toasts in both Gaelic and English. Slanta math, to freedom. For Bonnie Prince Charlie, each cheer is a bead on the string of solidarity, each echoing syllable a thread weaving them tighter together. Listeners might feel their own pulse quicken as these mantras settle into the room's rhythm, the mead spice blending with the night's tension, until the two are indistinguishable. Another swallow, deeper this time, loosens Ewan's tongue enough for him to murmur a vow. "By this cup I swear to ride at dawn and stand with you. Come sword or scaffold." His words hang in the amber light, steeped in mead's emboldening embrace. Around him, nods answer the vow, each head bowed, each affirmation resonating like the final clang of a forger's hammer shaping steel. In the growing warmth of shared drink, conspirators press their goblets together in a silent salute before draining the last of the honeyed brew. The rims clink like distant bells foretelling a grim Eucharist, and the metallic tang of pewter mingles with mead's sweetness on the breath that follows. Listeners sense the subtle shift. Resolve, once tentative, now feels as potent as any blade. As the mead's warmth settles into bone and marrow, the conspirators draw in a collective breath. The honeyed haze of the cellar is pierced by the clarity of shared purpose. These vows, sweetened by spiced liquor, have bound each heart into a unified cadence of insurrection. And in that moment of silent accord, each pulse aligned with mead-fueled conviction, listeners drift on the slow, steady rhythm of rebellion's first true heartbeat. The conspirators gather in the candlelit undercroft, their whispered plans melding with the steady drip of condensation and the faint hum of distant footsteps overhead. In that charged hush, every sound carries weight. Threads of conversation dissolve in the vaulted acoustics, replaced by the soft sigh of ancient stone shifting in temperature. Then, a sudden scrape, leather against stone, a noise so sharp it slices through the murmur like a drawn dirk. All eyes pivot toward the narrow spiraling stairs at the chamber's far end. Each conspirator holds his breath as one figure emerges. Thomas Farquhar, the very man they feared might walk this path. Listeners feel the collective tightening of the room's breath, the tension mounting in the flickering candlelight. Farquhar's boots descend first. They are heavy-thighed affairs, made of supple leather, softened by decades of wear. The vamp is dark and scuffed, the seams stretched ever so slightly by miles of travel over rain-slicked roads and jagged mountain passes. As each boot meets a flagstone, it thuds with deliberate intent, a muted drumbeat that reverberates against arch and wall. It is a sound at once mechanical and ominous, echoing like a distant gunshot in the hush of the hill. You can almost feel the boots' weight through the soles, as though each step carries the gravity of guilt. Listeners sense the slow march of suspicion in that cadence. Thud, pause, thud, pause, each beat shaped by hesitation and resolve. The boots' worn leather creaks softly, a low complaint that underscores the seriousness of Farquhar's presence. It is as if the boots themselves whisper, "I know too much, and you know it too." In the half-light, you might notice the errant fleck of mud on a boot's toe, a stain from some roadside ditch, proof that Farquhar's path has been muddy, both literally and morally. There is a fleeting moment of observational humour in that detail. Even betrayers cannot entirely escape the mess of their own journeys. Yet the humour flickers and is gone, swallowed by the boot's insistent approach. As he takes each measured step, the laces, thick and frayed, snap taut, and you hear the tension in the fibres. That quiet snap is a reminder that Farquhar is bound to his own choices, each one tightening his ember of betrayal. Listeners feel each nuance, the enlargement of leather where muscles flex, the faint shift of boot flexing against the foot, the subtle release of steam from the warmed leather meeting the cellar's chill. With each advance, the boots command the floorboards, bending the wood ever so slightly under their tread. A soft groan echoes through the bench, where Ewan sits, wood protesting the weight not of bodies but of consequence. It is as though the room itself acknowledges the fateful arrival, every grain of wood and stone vibrating with the weight of what is to come. Ewan's heart thrums in sync with those footfalls, each beat a cautious countdown. Listeners sense the shared pulse, a collective intake of breath matching the boot's rhythm, as if life itself has snapped into alignment with those approaching steps. The final thud lands directly in front of the table, where Farquhar pauses. The sudden stillness that follows is so profound it rings in the ears, a ringing that seems louder than the marching boots themselves. In that pregnant silence, you catch the faintest echo of pain in the boots' scuffed leather, a reminder that betrayal carries its own scars. Farquhar lifts his gaze, eyes narrowing, lips pressed into a thin line, and the boots settle into place, heavy and immovable. Listeners feel the shift. Betrayal has not only marched in, but taken root, each bootprint an indelible mark on the chamber floor. And so, as the boots come to rest and the echoes fade, the room remains suspended in their wake, a tableau of hushed fear and fractured trust. The simple scrape of leather on stone has spoken more loudly than any shouted challenge in this vaulted cellar. Betrayal has found its voice. Imagine the charged stillness that follows the final echo of boots on stone. The conspirators gather their wits under flickering candlelight, shadows dancing across high arches and rough-hewn benches. In that wavering glow, Thomas Farquhar stands poised, the silent epicenter of suspicion. His head tilts ever so slightly, and his eyes come alive, shifting like twin lanterns probing the dark. His gaze first rests on Ewan MacLean, sharp and calculating, before skimming across the circle. Listeners sense how those eyes, half-lidded with the air of practiced calm, barely conceal the tension thrumming beneath. In one moment they are the relaxed, courteous gaze of a fellow conspirator. In the next, they ignite with feverish calculation, darting from face to face as if counting hidden strengths and sifting vulnerabilities. There is a subtle, almost playful rhythm to his survey. He lets his gaze linger on the eldest laird, whose lined face bears the weight of years in both court and battlefield. The eyes flicker with respect, or is it challenge, before darting to a younger tacksman whose grip tightens on a belt buckle. Perhaps Farquhar notes that fleeting tremor, amused by its betraying honesty. Listeners feel their own pulse quicken at the thought. Every small sign of nervousness is now a clue in his silent interrogation. He shifts again, gaze gliding to Lady Isabel Drummond in her dark tartan cloak. His eyes narrow fractionally, not in disdain, but in genuine curiosity. What secrets does a noblewoman's silence hold? In that brief contact, he projects a question. What lines will you draw when rebellion demands your choice? Her still, unreadable expression only deepens the tension, and Farquhar's eyes flick away with a barely perceptible nod, as though acknowledging a worthy adversary. Subtle observational humour surfaces when his gaze swings to the burly chief, who, in attempting to appear unshakable, tightens his shoulders so much, his plaid wrinkles awkwardly. Farquhar's lips quirk ever so slightly, an unspoken jest at the chief's expense. It's a small human moment that listeners catch in the corners of their own awareness, a reminder that even betrayal's architect cannot resist a private smirk. His eyes settle again on Ewan, narrowing just enough to pierce the bothies' gloom. In that moment, the conspirator's pulse seems audible, matching the silent drumbeat of Farquhar's gaze. The look is a dare. You see me, and you know what I might be. No words pass between them, yet the challenge is clear. Either expose him now, or forever. Hold your peace. Listeners feel the electric charge in that meeting of eyes. A quiet duel played out in candlelight. Each flicker of his gaze seems timed to candle's rhythm. As a flame sputters, his eyes glint unexpectedly, then retreat when the light steadies, like a predator testing its prey. He's mapping allegiances and weaknesses without uttering a single vowel. The whispers of shifting cloaks and the soft scratch of quills on vellum fade against the pulse of his scrutiny. In that hush, Farquhar's gaze commands the room more completely than any raised voice could. Finally, the feverish intensity ebbs. His eyes settle into a mask of calm civility, half-lidded once more, as though nothing perilous has just occurred. He inclines his head, addressing the Earl with smooth politeness, and the moment dissolves like mist. Yet, listeners carry the echo of his shifting gaze, the sense that secrets lie in every wrinkle of fabric, in every quiver of a lip, and that betrayal need never speak its name to exact its toll. In the candlelit enclave beneath Stirling's ramparts, Farquhar's eyes have spoken volumes, and as they finally find rest, the room exhales, carrying with it the weight of unsaid accusations and unanswered challenges, wrapped within those flickering, shifting eyes. Imagine the vaulted chamber's candlelight flickering low, shadows stretching long across damp flagstones as conspirators lean in, voices hushed to whispers. At the head of the table, the Earl of Mar permits a barely perceptible nod, an almost forgotten signal in the chamber's low light. It is a gesture so slight that were it not for the blood at stake, it might be mistaken for a polite acknowledgement of an unspoken jest. In that instant, two burly guards step forward, their boots, heavy as iron-bound drums, thud softly against the stone floor. Each step measured, each movement disciplined. Listeners sense the shift in air. The room exhales as authority advances. The guards' hands close on hefty oak bolts, the wood grain puckering under firm grips that have learned restraint through years of duty. The first bar lifts with a soft groan, hinges protesting the motion after long disuse. Then, with deliberate strength, it slides into place across the door's iron-bound frame. The second follows in kind, the two bars forming a fortress of timber against treachery. When the guards finish, they press their shoulders against the door, bracing it as though asserting the gravity of their charge. Then the slam. Heavy oak colliding with oak, iron bracket striking iron hinge, unleashes a metallic clang that echoes like a final verdict through the chamber's vaulted arches. The sound reverberates off damp stone folding back on itself in rolling swells until every corner trembles with its resonance. Listeners feel the echo in their bones, as though the door's thunder were a heartbeat marking the end of free passage. In the sudden stillness that follows, torches gutter in their sconces, the flames shine from the clang, as though startled by its authority. Wax drips down the sides in molten tears, pooling on the stone sills in tiny golden lakes. The low, steady hiss of those dripping droplets underscores the finality of the moment. The conspirators and the turncoat alike are now bound within these walls, each breath and heartbeat shared in the same confined space. The cold steel latch snaps into place with a crisp click, sealing the lower bolt in a grip, as unforgiving as fate itself. The sound is sharp and precise, a punctuation mark that leaves no room for negotiation. You almost sense the latch's teeth meshing with a soft clink, the hidden mechanics of rebellion locking in step with the plot's own gravity. Listeners detect the subtle vibrations traveling across the table, a faint resonance that hums through oak and leather, benches and cloaks alike. There is a moment of collective inhalation, a shared breath caught in every throat. The room has shifted from whispering haven to sealed chamber. In that breathless dark, the conspirators and their potential betrayer stand face to face with their choices. The air feels heavier now, as though loaded with the weight of every secret uttered and every oath sworn under candlelight. Subtle observational humor emerges in the pause. One guard, perhaps unused to such duties beneath vaulted ceilings, glances down at his own gauntleted hands, as though surprised to find himself in the role of jailer. It is a quiet reminder that even those charged with delivering finality can feel the absurdity of locking away a fellow Briton, perhaps even a friend. Yet duty trumps reflection, and he straightens, shoulders squared against the sealed door. As the last flicker of torchlight steadies, the chamber settles into muted expectancy. The rattling of armor ceases, the rustle of cloaks quiets, and conspirators exchange glances, some emboldened by resolve, others pale with the knowledge that there is no turning back. Listeners lean in, feeling the tension coil like spring steel around the bolts and latches, holding them fast in this chamber of plotted revolt. In that sealed silence, the room transforms. No longer a meeting place, it becomes a crucible where loyalty, betrayal, and destiny collide. Each heart pounds in time with the echoes of oak and steel, marking out a rhythm that carries them toward dawn. And as the candles flicker steady once more, you sense the inescapable truth. Within these bolted oak walls and silent steel hinges, rebellion is no longer an idea, but a living, breathing force, imprisoned, perhaps, but no less formidable for its confinement. Imagine Ewan MacLean's lungs burning as he scrambles up the narrow cellar stairs, each step slick with damp stone and the faint smear of past footprints. Behind him, the cavernous shadows rupture as redcoat torches stab through the gloom, their bright points of flame flickering like hungry eyes. Each torch's glare carves long, jittery silhouettes across the curved stairs and rough-hewn walls, revealing pursuers in scarlet coats and steel-helmeted musketeers advancing in a living tide of light. You feel the sudden rush of heat as pinwood torches sputter above, blades of flame licking toward your shoulders, hissing softly as drips of hot resin plop onto the flagstones below. The air thickens with the resin's sweet smoke, an odd comfort in its familiarity. So many hearth fires and covert meetings begun with that same scent, now turned fierce in rebellion's chase. Listeners taste its warmth on their tongues, a contrast to the cellar's habitual chill, as though the past and present entwine in a single breath. Above the crackle of burning pine, a swirl of acrid gunpowder rides down the stairwell, an odor so sharp it almost stings the nostrils. It drifts like a dark haze, bearing the echo of musket reports, crack, 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 each discharge a punctuation against the thrum of boots. You can almost feel the tiny particles clinging to your skin, gritty as dust from the moor, and wonder at the strange intimacy of being perfumed by both smoke and lead. The frantic pounding of boots overhead merges with your own racing heartbeat. There is a wild harmony in that convergence. Every thud against stone seems to echo in your chest, a drum of urgency that synchronizes your breath with the redcoats' advance. Listeners may sense their own pulse hitching in time, a shared rhythm of fear and adrenaline. Despite the chaos, A flicker of observational humour emerges in the scene. One soldier's torch sputters and flares, casting his face in sudden relief, eyes wild, mustache singed at one corner. Before plunging him back into shadow, he sputters a faint oath, shaking the torch until glowing embers cascade like sparks from a blacksmith's forge. Ewan, hurrying past, notes the man's brief look of insulted surprise, as if offended that his torch dared underperform at such a critical juncture. As Ewan surmounts the final step, torchlight catches the gleam of steel on muskets and bayonets. Each glint seems to announce a new threat, a soldier rounding the corner, a pair of leather boots planted firmly on the landing above. The torch's beams sweep in unison, arc, revealing faces set in grim determination, then vanishing into shadow as they pass out of view. Listeners feel the disorienting cycle of hide and seek, light and dark folding in upon itself. In the narrowing corridor beyond the stairs, the heat of torches presses against worn wool cloaks, and the tunnel's walls seem to contract under the assault of light. Every surface stone, wood, even spilled moss, shimmers with transient flame. The acrid tang of gunpowder lingers in your throat, a stubborn taste that no amount of hurried breathing can dispel. Yet beneath it all hums the unspoken promise that each step taken under torchlight carries you farther from betrayal's cradle and closer to the unknown night beyond. Through this torchlight storm, through heat and smoke, gunfire and shadow, Ewan's flight becomes a single, unbroken thread of survival. And as the last flare flickers out of view, listeners are left with the echo of crackling resin, the memory of blazing pursuit, and the steady, determined thump of a heart refusing to yield. Ewan MacLean's boots skid on the warped floorboards of the vaulted cellar as chaos erupts around him. In the frenzy, a lantern perched too close to a bench tips over, and a rivulet of golden oil spills across the wood. Time seems to slow as the oil seeps into every crack and knot, guided by gravity toward forgotten gaps beneath cobblestones. Listeners sense the hush before the storm, the soft slurp of liquid meeting wood, the delicate sheen that spreads like a living thing, then a soft hiss. The oil, drawn toward a stray ember still glowing in a corner, ignites with reluctant urgency. The flame begins as a gentle flicker, a breath of warmth against cold stone, but quickly blossoms into fiery tongues that lick hungrily at the cellar walls. You almost feel the motion of those tongues brushing upward like the tentative search of a young firefly for the night sky. The last ember at the hearth crackles, a final exhalation of light before surrendering to the inferno's rise. Sparks leap from the hearth like wounded fireflies, drifting upward into shadowed arches before flickering out in the cold. Each tiny spark glimmers briefly, a suspended note of colour, then vanishes, as though mourning its own demise. Listeners feel the gentle ache of loss in each dying spark, a reminder that even the smallest glimmer can carry weighty significance. As the flames spread, the stone walls glow with sudden, unaccustomed heat. The moss that clings in damp patches hisses and steams, releasing a scent of scorched earth that mingles with the acrid tang of burning oil. Listeners taste that bitterness on their tongues, a gustatory echo of disgrace that binds them to Ewan's plight. The chamber's usual cool hush is replaced by a dull roar, a steady crescendo of crackling wood and shifting stone. Amid the roar, Ewan inhales sharply, his breath visible in fleeting clouds that dissolve as quickly as they appear. His gasp for air is almost drowned by the fire's wrath. Yet it carries a raw honesty. Betrayal's blaze spares no one, and the simplest sanctuary can turn to tomb in a matter of heartbeats. Listeners feel their own chests tighten as they mirror that breath. Each inhale tinged with smoke, each exhale a reluctant surrender to the moment's urgency. Despite the peril, a subtle wryness threads through the scene. Ewan notes the guard in scarlet coat fumbling with his sword, his gauntleted hand slick with oil and ash, only to brandish it like an oversized pestle in a kitchen. The moment's absurdity flares as briefly as the fire itself, a flicker of human folly beneath the cloak of violence. Listeners catch that humor in the corner of their minds, a tiny buoy of laughter against the dread-laden tide. Above the roar, the crackle of stone, loosening under heat, adds an ominous undertone. Small chips tumble from the arches, clinking against the floor, as though casting lots for who will stand and who will fall. Each tiny clatter echoes in Ewan's ears, reminding him that betrayal's consequences are as unpredictable as a collapsing wall. As the flames climb higher, the cellar's entrance becomes a tunnel of molten light, an orange-red portal, demanding choice: stand and be consumed, or flee into the uncertain night. Listeners feel the heat intensify, a physical press against their skins that mirrors the moral pressure Ewan faces. His final, steely exhale dissolves into the raw, forging a resolve tempered by fire's crucible. In that moment of conflagration, where hearth's last sigh and a betrayal's blaze converge, Ewan's flight becomes inevitable. Each flicker of flame, each hiss of oil, guides him toward the narrow stair that leads to freedom, and as sparks dance like wounded fireflies behind him, listeners drift on the slow, steady rhythm of his escape, hearts attuned to the whisper of embers, and the unyielding truth that loyalty's flame can both illuminate and incinerate. The cellar's conflagration surges around Ewan MacLean. Torches flicker like frantic fireflies above a floor slick with oil and embers. A comrade, hulking and unflinching, spots the surge of redcoats barreling down the stairwell. With a grunt of determination, he lunges for the heavy oak bench that served as a meeting place mere moments ago. Hands wrapped in leather, he yanks it aside in one desperate heave, as though trying to uproot the very walls that threaten their sanctuary. The wood shatters with a thunderous crack that reverberates through the vaulted arches, an explosive punctuation that drowns the roar of flame for a heartbeat. Listeners feel the resonance underfoot, as if the bench itself bids them flee. Splinters, sharp, pale shards, scatter into the air like startled birds taking flight. They plunge into the flickering light and vanish into shadow, each point a fleeting pinprick against the smoky backdrop. Ewan ducks instinctively under the broken frame, the rough timber rasping against his coat as he slides beneath. You can almost feel the grain of the fractured wood against your shoulder, the splintered edges nibbling at cloth and skin. One jagged shard grazes his cheek, leaving a whisper of pain, a subtle sting that anchors him in the immediacy of survival. Listeners, too, sense that prick of discomfort, a reminder that no refuge is without cost. Beneath Ewan, the stone floor is slick with spilled mead and oil, but now darkened by a deep, bright pool where his friend fell. The blood's warmth clings to his fingers as he steadies himself, a slick reminder that in this desperate flight, loyalty can be as sharp as any blade. Listeners almost taste the metallic tang of fresh blood mingling with the acrid scent of burning pine, a somber cocktail that demands attention. Amid the chaos, a ragged rattle escapes the fallen man's chest, the unmistakable sound of fractured ribs shifting. It is a raw staccato rattle thump, that punctuates the roar of the blaze. Each metallic clang of stone on stone is answered by that rattling echo, weaving a tapestry of pain and urgency. Ewan glimpses the soldier's mask of white-knuckled grit, hears a whispered curse, soft guttural, "By God's bones," as the injured man fights both breath and injury. There is a grim humour in that cursed phrase, a man swearing by his own broken bones, as though his body itself might bear mute witness to the folly of rebellion. Listeners feel a fleeting tremor of shared humanity. Even in terror, the old need for expletives persists. Ewan presses a woolen sleeve against the wound, the rough fabric soaking through with warm, sticky blood. The irregular texture of the cloth contrasts with the smooth flow of the artery, as though nature's brutality and human ingenuity have been woven into a single instant. The injured comrade nods slightly, an acknowledgement of pain and camaraderie, before Ewan hauls him into a deeper shadow, away from flickering flames and prying muskets. Around them, the cellar's walls glow with scalding heat. A cluster of sparks drifts down like glowing ash, tracing a luminous arc before settling into a hissing puddle. Amid that inferno, the broken bench stands as a testament to sacrifice. Once a symbol of fellowship, now splintered ruin. Listeners feel the wood's fractured integrity echoing betrayal's shatter. One moment of bravery cleaving hope and despair. As Ewan helps his comrade to safety, each careful step carries them further from the immediate threat, yet the weight of blood and splintered wood remains. Every heartbeat mirrors the crack of splintered oak. Every breath tastes of smoke and iron. And in that suspended flight, listeners grasp the paradox of rebellion's cost. Loyalty compels acts of desperation that leave both body and soul marked by irrevocable sacrifice. Through the cellar's door, the night air awaits, cool, open, and unjudging. But no escape can wash away the memory of splintered benches and the hushed rattle of ribs. In the hush that follows, Ewan's pulse steadies, yet the echo of that thunderous crack endures, a solemn hymn to courage pressed into wood and bone. Imagine emerging from the cellar's choking smoke into a world painted in silver and slate. The moor stretches before you under a moon just cresting the horizon, its pale light washing across rolling expanses of heather and grass. Ewan MacLean's chestnut pony, its flank still warm from flight, picks its way onto the open heath. The pony's hooves, hardened by rocky paths, now sink into the damp velvet of bloom, each slip accompanied by a soft sigh. The heather's silent footfall beneath Ewan's woolen breeches. He feels the tiny tufts of heather leave damp smudges, green-brown stains that mark the passing of hoof and rider. Listeners can almost feel the cool moisture seeping through thick fabric, a delicate kiss of the moor's breath. With each step, the petite blossoms snap under hoof in a muted crack, softer than bone, but sharp enough to echo faintly in the hush. It is an unseen heartbeat pulsing beneath the surface of night, a concealed rhythm that could betray their flight to bloodhounds lying in wait. The wind drifts low across the moor, brushing through grass and blossom in a gentle rustle that fills the silence. This breeze carries the scent of wet earth and wild thyme, a perfume wild and untamed, mingling with the pony's warm breath and the distant tang of peat-smoke still clinging to Ewan's cloak. Listeners feel the wind's touch in their own throats, a cooling caress that whispers caution even as it soothes their racing pulse. Despite the quiet, a subtle humour flickers beneath the tension. The pony, distracted by a lone curlew's cry, swivels its head with an exaggerated blink, as though scolding the bird for interrupting its dignified escape. Ewan leans forward, murmuring an apology to both bird and beast, an absurd declaration of manners in the face of peril. That brief exchange, a horse's roll of the eye, a man's sheepish smile, grounds listeners in the shared humanity of flight. Even when futures hang by a thread, small courtesy still clings. The moon arcs higher, illuminating patches of the moor like lantern-lit islands in a sea of shadow. Ewan urges his pony onward with a gentle nudge of his heel, each hoofbeat maintaining that hushed tension. The thud of hoof on heather is now one more voice in the night's hush, joining the low rustle of grass and the distant lament of uncaring wind. Listeners sense how these sounds weave together into a tapestry, no longer solitary events but threads in a broader tapestry of escape. As they ride, the moor's deceptive placidity deepens the suspense. Each broken blossom and soft crack feels amplified, a reminder that freedom here is precarious. The noonday battlefield has been replaced by the moonlit moor, but the stakes remain the same: faith in steed and rider, in the silent stillness, and in the hope that the heather's footfalls will outpace the hound's bay. Listeners settle into that rhythmic procession, hearts aligning with the pony's unhurried gallop and the moor's ancient hush, a steady, quiet rhythm of survival under a moonlit sky. Imagine the moor's silvered hush wrapping around you like a cloak as you guide your chestnut pony over gently undulating ground. The heather's soft footfalls have become a familiar lullaby. But then, from beyond a distant ridge, a single piercing bay rends the stillness. It cuts through the night like a hunting horn, urgent and hungry, its note stretched taut across moonlit expanses. Ewan MacLean's breath catches in his chest, frost-white in the chill air, as he leans closer to his pony's warm mane. The animal shudders beneath him, nostrils flaring to taste the scent of hounds long before they appear. You might almost feel the pony's muscles bunch and quiver, a silent prelude to flight as it senses the predator's call. Listeners sense that shared instinct, the primal recognition that sound alone can warn of closing danger. The bay rises again, louder this time, ricocheting off granite outcrops and bouncing from tufted grass to distant knoll. Its echo multiplies in the open land bay, until the sound envelops the riders, as though the very moor is calling their names with steel-edged enthusiasm. There is a resonance in the cry that vibrates through bone and bone, a reminder that these hills once bred wolves and men alike, both masters of stealth and silent steps. Under the bay's insistent insistence, the wind seems to sharpen. You feel its teeth in your lungs, a clean, cutting breeze that carries the scent of dew-damp heather and a faint, coppery note of blood in the underbrush. Listeners might shiver at that mingling of aromas, sweet flowering thyme and the metallic promise of pursuit, each inhalation a mixture of wild beauty and looming peril. Despite the tension, a subtle quirk of humour surfaces in Ewan's mind, an image of a hound's enthusiastic snout bursting through a hedge of heather, tongue lolling like a comical banner. It's a fleeting thought, one of absurd levity amid dread. Yet it softens the moment before the bay returns, renewed and more insistent, snapping at the moonlit shadows. Ewan spurs his pony gently, coaxing it forward with soft words. "Easy now, girl. No need to show them our sprint yet." The pony's ears prick in response, and you might imagine a faint snort of agreement as it picks up pace. Listeners draw in sync with that measured gallop, feeling the steady rhythm of hoof on turf and heart on edge. The bay crescendos once more, closer now, swollen with anticipation. It carries the promise of thunderous paws propelling hounds in single-minded pursuit. In that note lies an unspoken question. Can silence outrun noise? Can shadow outpace light? The echo chamber of open land amplifies both predator and prey, coiling the moment into taut stillness. As the bay fades gradually over the ridge, replaced by the softer rustle of wind-swept grass, Ewan slows his pony to a careful walk. The world seems to exhale, the night's tension momentarily slipping away. Yet listeners know the reprieve is brief. The moor holds no allegiance, and the hounds' voices will return with relentless purpose. In the interplay of wolfhound bay and heather's soft footfall, you sense the wild heart of the Scottish moor laid bare. Each breath, each echo, each shared prickling of fear binds you more tightly to Ewan's flight. And as the bay's final note dissolves into the night, you remain alert to the moor's whispers, hearts aligned with the memory of that single, urgent cry carried across open land under the cold, watchful moon. Imagine the moor's silvered expanse stretching in quiet relief behind you as Ewan urges his pony onward, each hoofbeat a soft drum on the damp heather. High above, a single snowy owl wheels in the pale lunar glow, its ghost-white wings outstretched like living silken banners. There is no rustle of feathers, no flutter of wings, only the serene sweep of air parted by its glide. Listeners feel the hush deepen at that silent motion, as though the night itself bows in deference to the owl's passage. Perched just beyond the ridgeline, the owl pauses in its aerial wanderings, wings folding into an elegant, almost architectural shape. Its broad frame blurs the boundary between bird and stone sculpture, an avian monument, crafted by eons rather than by human hands. In that moment, listeners might sense the chill of the night deepen, not from cold air but from the owl's ancient stillness, an impartial gaze set upon the unfolding drama below. The owl's wide amber eyes follow Ewan's progress with unwavering calm. They burn with a slow, knowing light, pupils pinched into fine slits as they track each movement. The sway of cloak, the rise and fall of pony's back, the wet smears left by crushed heather blossoms. There is no alarm in those eyes, only a patient curiosity, as though the owl perceives the chase as one pulse in the world's vast heartbeat. Listeners, too, feel that equanimity settling over their own thoughts, a gentle reminder to observe without entanglement. Below, the distant bay of wolfhounds fades into the hush, but the owl remains, indifferent to both prey and pursuer. Its head swivels with graceful precision, the soft plumage of its neck rippling like water disturbed by a single drop. Listeners might almost hear the faint creak of its articulation, a subtle mechanical click that silhouettes its purpose to watch, to wait, to outlast. There is a subtle note of wry humour in the owl's serene detachment. Ewan glances upward, breath-catching, as he recognises a shape, both familiar and uncanny, an avian witness, unconcerned with human allegiance. He offers a silent nod, half in greeting, half in acknowledgement, that his plight is but a verse in a much longer story. Listeners catch that unspoken exchange, a man's fleeting bow to a creature untouched by rebellion's flames. The lunar glow shifts as clouds drift across the sky, and the owl's white feathers absorb and reflect each change, transforming from pale gold to frosted silver. Its silhouette becomes a living barometer of the night's temperament, bright and bold under open sea, muted and spectral as vapor slips between earth and moon. In that interplay of light, listeners sense the subtle rhythms of nature's own cycles, birth, chase, rest, playing out above the mortal coil. As Ewan and his pony recede into shadowed folds of the moor, the owl resumes its silent patrol, tracing lazy arcs in the sky like a slow-drawn brushstroke. Each glide seems to measure time itself, as if the bird calculates hours in the spread of its wings rather than mere minutes. Listeners feel the pulse of night broaden and slow, guided by the imperative that life endures beyond the immediacy of danger. Finally, the owl alights on a solitary boulder, feathers softening into a downy mound crowned by its head's regal stillness. It blinks once, eyes narrowing to gleaming beads, then settles into a silent vigil. Below, Ewan disappears into the moor's embrace. Yet the hour remains, an unblinking guardian of Earth's longer story. In that final tableau, listeners are left with the bird's ancient attachment, a gentle encouragement to release the edge of mortal fear and drift into the vast, enduring hush of nature's moonlit moor. Imagine stepping through a shattered doorway into the nave of an abandoned chapel. Its walls crumbled and roof collapsed to jagged beams. The air here tastes of damp mortar and centuries-old dust, a musty perfume carried on a breeze that stirs stray motes like drifting pilgrims in silent procession. Moonlight pours in through gaping holes overhead, tracing beams of pale silver across rubble-strewn flagstones. Amid the debris lie the effigies of medieval chiefs, half buried beneath collapsed arches and fallen pews. Their once proud visages are now cracked and lichen-flecked, faces frozen in timeless repose. Ewan MacLean slips between toppled balustrades, boots crunching on loose stone, until he stands before one such effigy, a great warrior carved in limestone, sword clasped across his chest as though guarding secrets still whispered in the wind. The moonlight brushes the effigy's features, accentuating every chipped edge and worn detail. Listeners might picture the cold glow painting the stone's rough surface in high relief. Sharp cheekbones, a chipped nose, and the faint suggestion of a once regal helmet, now eroded to a helmet's ghost. There is a tragic beauty in the decay. The effigy's eyes, once alight with carved authority, now cradle shadows that flicker with each passing cloud. Ewan kneels, running a trembling hand along the moss-covered armor. His palm encounters stone so cold it steals warmth instantly, an almost intoxicating bite against skin. The moss is soft and damp, like velvet brushed by morning dew, its emerald fuzz contrasting with the stone's gritty texture. Each ridge and groove under his fingers is a fingerprint of time, a story carved in silence. Around him, the nave's vaulted ribs still soar, though many have collapsed. From a high arch, a single drop of water falls steadily, plink, a delicate bell resonating in the vast emptiness. Listeners sense that each drop echoes not just in stone, but in heart, tolling for lost prayers and unspoken oaths. The rhythm is slow, measured, plink, 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 a lullaby for the restless dead and the weary living alive. Despite the solemnity, a subtle humour flutters through the scene. The Ewan notices a small chip of stone at the effigy's elbow, as though some long-ago child or careless novice had tested its durability by nimble fingers. He allows himself a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement that even in these grand ruined halls, human hands once reached out in curiosity or mischief. He stands and moves to a second effigy, half buried beneath a cascade of fallen stones. This one depicts a clan matriarch, a carved shawl pooling around her shoulders like stone waves. Moonlight reveals lichen creeping over her breastplate, soft green tendrils emphasizing the statue's solemn dignity. Ewan brushes away a few leaves to expose a deeply incised knotwork design on her chest, a faded reminder that some stories survive only in the grooves of memory, waiting for hands to rediscover them. The chapel's broken windows frame slivers of the night sky, each painless opening a window into eternity. Listeners feel the chapel's breath in that moment, ancient stone exhaling beneath the sigh of wind, as though acknowledging new pilgrims in its ruined sanctum. The scent of moss and mildew grows stronger, mingling with the faint, sweet undercurrent of wildflowers growing beyond the steps, a botanical hymn to resilience. Ewan pauses beneath a moonlit arch, gazing up as silver light filters through shattered timbers. He lifts a hand to touch the scarred keystone overhead, feeling its cool solidity. In that gesture, listeners sense the cathedral's quiet permission to carve one more vow in the Book of Stone. His voice, hushed and reverent, utters a Gaelic phrase, an untranslatable whisper carried on the chapel's lingering breath. The words settle into the stone like fresh ink, binding his promise to James Stewart with the chapel's ancient loyalty to time and earth. Around him, the effigies remain unmoved, silent, steadfast, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal coil. Listeners sense their undying vigil, sentinels that have borne witness to centuries of joy and sorrow, siege and sanctuary, and now stand watch over one last secret oath forged in moonlight. In that silvered stillness you carry away the chapel's hush, the moss's softness, the stone's cold truth, and the faint promise of eternal memory whispered in every cracked face. Imagine standing in the chapel's ruined nave, moonlight drifting through collapsed rafters and pooling in silver crescents on mossy flagstones. Ewan MacLean's heart thrums with a soft, insistent beat as he reaches into his breast pocket and withdraws the Stuart dispatch, its cream-coloured vellum folded neatly, the wax seal chipped at the edges, but still a vivid crimson in the lunar glow. Listeners sense the letter's delicate thickness between his fingers, as though it holds within it every whispered vow sworn beneath rowan trees, and every oath carved in clandestine cellars. He approaches a narrow fissure in the stonework, an impossibly thin crack running up the chapel's north wall, where a fractured column once stood sentinel. The crack's edges are smoothed by centuries of wind and touch, its interior dark with the fugitive's shadow. Ewan pauses, leaning close so that the moonlight silhouettes his profile. He brings the dispatch to the fissure, aligning its folded edge with the stone's yawning slit, as though presenting a key to a vault. Listeners feel the tension coil, a moment suspended between desperation and destiny. With a hand that trembles from exhaustion and adrenaline alike, he presses the letter into the narrow slot. The parchment's grain slips against the stone's rough surface, the contrast so immediate it hums in the fingertips. You might almost feel the scratch of fibre on granite, the parchment's crisp edge yielding minutely to the wall's embrace. Listeners sense the subtle friction, a tactile echo of the world's rough textures cradling fragile human endeavour. Ewan then traces the horseshoe emblem once more with his index finger. The worn wax yields slightly under his touch, its chipped form cool and unyielding. The indentations of each nail hole catch his fingertip, tiny bas-relief reminders of past oaths carried on this very dispatch. His finger trembles, both from the day's trials and from the solemn significance of this final act. Listeners feel the solemnity in that single stroke, a tender benediction whispered into stone. As he eases the dispatch deeper, the chapel's fissure seems to tighten, as though welcoming the letter into its ancient heart. The cool stone walls press around the parchment like a lover's embrace. Firm yet protective, the moment carries the intimate hush of shared secret, stone closing over paper in a vow of its own, to guard this tender hope long after its author has vanished into the night. Listeners sense the paradox of permanence in fragile things, that a simple letter might outlast its writer, cradled in crumbling walls until history itself untangles its meaning. A subtle humour flickers as Ewan straightens, noticing a smudge of wax on his sleeve, an unintentional badge of courage. He brushes at it with the back of his hand, sending a tiny flake of crimson wax tumbling to the moss below. Listeners catch the small absurdity in that gesture. Even in the gravity of rebellion, human hands remain prone to smears and stains. Yet the act does nothing to mar the stain's symbolism. Instead, it underscores the authenticity of his choice. Above, the moon crests a broken window frame, and the dispatch's folded edge gleams faintly in the renewed light. Listeners sense the chapel itself seem to breathe with approval, as though the stone walls exhale centuries of dust to honour this final message. The air carries the scent of wet like in an ancient mortar, grounding the moment in the chapel's storied past. Ewan steps back, lingering only a heartbeat to commit the chapel's hushed silhouette to memory. The rough-hewn nave, the silvered effigies, and now the narrow fissure holding his most precious secret. Each of those images settles into the mind's eye, a panorama of hope and history intertwined. Listeners feel that slow, steady rhythm of reflection, the heartbeat of a man who has entrusted his cause to stone and shadow, and the patience of time to reveal its truth. And as he fades into the chapel's deeper gloom, the last image that lingers is the narrow crack's embrace of parchment and promise, a silent sentinel to oaths, bound by wax, written in ink, and sealed in moonlight, standing vigil until the dawn of destiny. Imagine the wind stirring through the broken window panes of the ruined chapel, setting shards of fallen glass to tinkling like distant chimes. Outside, church spires punctuate the night sky, their silhouettes sketched against the moon's pale disk. Ewan MacLean steels himself against the chapel's cool breath as he sinks to one knee before a shattered altar. The stone steps under his boot are slick with moss and dew, and listeners can almost feel the chill climbing his trousers. An intimate reminder that vows are rarely spoken from comfort. The altar's surface is cracked and heaped with rubble, yet its central recess still bears the ghost of consecration, a faint circle where candles once burned, and a thin stain of dried wax running like an echo of past devotion. He bows his head, and the moonlight slants through a collapsed beam, painting his shoulders with silver light. A single, almost comical moment passes as he catches his cloak on a jagged fragment of stone, an undignified hitch that prompts a soft, wry exhale. Even in solemnity, human hands retain their propensity for minor mischief. Ewan's voice, rough with fatigue and laced with reverence, breaks the chapel's hush. He speaks in soft Gaelic, each word deliberate and clear despite his weariness. "My life for you, my kind." The vow drifts upward, carried on a subtle current of air that slips through the shattered walls. Listeners sense the words dissolving like a curl of incense, prayer smoke rising to honor both fallen sanctity and living revolt. The Gaelic syllables linger in the chilled air, their cadence as gentle as a lullaby yet as resolute as a sharpened blade. Around him, the chapel seems to lean in, each broken arch and every moss-clad effigy standing as silent witness. The wind sighs through collapsed pews, rustling stray fragments of parchment and casting ribbons of dust into the altar's silvered glow. You almost hear the chapel exhale in response, a deep, cavernous rustle that settles the promise into its ancient bones. A distant owl calls, soft, measured hoots that echo the vow's rhythm. Listeners feel that natural refrain weaving through the broken stone, linking Earth's wild heart to human devotion. The owl's call is neither approving nor condemning. It is simply another voice in the night's chorus, underscoring the timeless truth that nature endures while human pledges strive for permanence. Ewan straightens, brushing a hand across his brow and flicking away a stray lock of hair. The chapel's moonlit haze shimmers around him, an ephemeral halo for a fleeting moment. He glances at the shattered altar one last time, offering a final nod, not to a king's portrait, but to the spirit of the cause he carries within. Listeners are left in that silvered stillness, hearts slowed to match the chapel's pulse. As Ewan rises, the church bells across the moor toll again, their deep bongs resonating through stone and sky. The vow lingers in the chapel's hush, a delicate filigree of sound that refuses to fade entirely. Listeners carry that echo with them. Mo Beatha Duit, a rig, a promise neither land nor time can erase, settling softly in the soul like a whispered prayer beneath the moon's watchful eye. And so, our moonlit flight across 1714 Scotland's glens and ruined chapels reaches its soft conclusion. We felt the hush of peat smoke dawns beneath rowan eyes, shared heather water oaths under vaulted arches, and slipped past redcoat torches that carved hungry shadows through secret cellars. We've sensed the rattle of splintered benches in fiery betrayal, the lone bay of hounds echoing across open moors, and the solemn gaze of silent effigies in moonlit ruins. Each moment, a whispered Gaelic prayer by shattered altars, a trembling seal pressed into stone, the mournful cry of an owl overhead, has invited you to lean back, breathe deeply, and let the Highlands' rhythms cradle you. If tonight's journey through mist-clad moors and smouldering loyalties stirred your curiosity, there are more hidden chapters awaiting discovery. From the underground councils of Stirling's vaults to the storm-scarred battlefields of later uprisings, our channel is your companion for slow, immersive tales that soothe the mind even as they awaken wonder. Now, rest your thoughts. Let the patter of pony hooves blend into your steady breath. The echo of church bells fade into stillness. Feel the weight of centuries settle like soft heather underfoot as you drift between past and present. When you're ready for the next quiet exploration, choose another path. Perhaps the solitary hermits of the Western Isles, or the forgotten monasteries hidden in glacial valleys. Each story is crafted to guide you toward calm reflection and gentle discovery. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next tranquil passage through time. And if tonight's tale left an imprint in your thoughts, share in the comments which moment lingers brightest and where you're joining us from this peaceful hour. Thank you for keeping the Jacobite sympathizers' spirits alive this twilight hour. Here, every silent vow becomes a lullaby. Sleep well, until our next gentle adventure.